is the DAWbench Radio Show, the official podcast of DAWbench.com.
Welcome to the DAWbench Radio Show. I am your host, Curigliano of AAVIM Technology in Melbourne, Australia. And I'm joined again, co-hosting by Pete Brown of Microsoft in Maryland in the United States. How you going, Pete?
Good, Vin. Good. How about you?
I'm doing good today. You know, I remember the last show we were all kind of, I don't know, what we were dodging. We were all kind of dodging the lurg, remember? We were all coughing.
Yeah. You know, I'll tell you what, Vin, I went to Mexico a couple of weeks ago and I was there for like 2 nights and I was careful with everything I ate and I had 2 weeks of horror after that, I'll just tell you.
You tend to attract it like a magnet, Peter.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
I'll pass on that next time, thanks.
Yep, all right, awesome. Hey, now today we have a very special guest joining us from the south of France, and that is Peter Gorges. And now Peter has been involved in the evolution of music technology in varying capacities for almost 4 decades, from sound designer, authoring and publishing journalism, to co-founding numerous innovative music software companies, those being Wizoo and UJAM. And that's only scratching the surface. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you very much, Vin. Thank you very much, Pete. Thanks for having me. It's actually, I almost feel uncomfortable with all the attention, but I'm very honored to be here.
Well deserved, and you're most welcome, Peter. Look, just before we get into it, I always like to start the show by saying, well, you know, what is my personal history with where I've intersected with your work? Now, your name wasn't something that was overly familiar to me, but as soon as I started researching the history, I've gone, oh, hang on. Right? So especially with Wizoo, because Wizoo was something that I'd encountered. It probably would have been mid-90s. I'm sure I've seen publications with the logo on it. I definitely knew about some sampling CDs that you'd done.
Yeah.
And then the virtual instruments, which we get into, which you did with Steinberg. And look, even to the point, I dragged out this Steinberg dealer kit that I've got that from the early 2000s that had all of the installation DVDs, which is still in pristine condition. And I kind of laid them out and took a photo and sent you the photo. I'm thinking, wow, okay. And and then also all the other work that you're doing even prior to Wizoo. So it was quite fascinating for me to see where your work had intersected with my personal experience. I'd used the various virtual instruments that you'd actually created without, again, you never put a name to an instrument. Usually you kind of just go, okay, it's an instrument, let's start playing. So to me, that was actually fascinating to see just how much your work had intersected with my personal experience. So for that, I'm going to give you a real early thank you very, very much, because
very welcome.
You know, some of those technologies, you know, we're going to say game-changing. You know, some of them may have been. Some of them were definitely controversial, which we will cover.
Yeah, that's a compliment right there. Thanks.
The controversial, yeah.
Yes,
So I think what would be great is if you can give us an overview of your own personal history with music and technology, and how that led you to the eventual path to the various disciplines, you know, that you explored in those years, in the 80s and 90s, and the eventual co-founding of Wizoo and then UJAM.
Very happy to. We have the first 3 hours for that, right?
Yeah. Oh, shoot, mate. We'll keep recording for as long as we need, mate.
You know, no, I'll just try to make it as brief as possible. So I grew up in Germany, very far away from any innovation in music and technology. I started playing the organ when I was 9 years old, the electronic organ, when I was 9 years old. I also had some lessons on a pipe organ. And when I was like 14, I was incredibly fascinated with the synthesizer. I think, in the local library, I borrowed a music cassette of Switched on Bach. And that just stopped my breath at the time. Anyway, eventually I could afford one. A Korg MS-20 was my first synthesizer.
Awesome.
Yeah. And that thing completely like changed my life. From then on, I knew exactly what I wanted to do, which was the opposite of what my parents wanted me to do. But, I was lucky enough that my life led me there. Like, for example, we have the civil service thing in Germany. I don't know if that translates, where you refuse to go to the military and then you do, civil service.
Yeah. We only had it in Australia in the 60s, I think. We never really had it when I was growing up. Not the age where they could have grabbed me, put it that way,
Yeah, so I started studying computer science, and then eventually I had to do the civil service. That went on for 2 years.
Right.
And during that time, I started working in a music studio, and so got exposed more to, more gear, big mixing console, a world that was completely unknown to me, especially in a small town in Germany. And, fast forward, eventually I met a guy from a music magazine, music magazine. I started writing reviews for them. It was a magazine called Soundcheck at the time. And he allowed me to write my very first book that was not published at the time. But the next one was published. It was a DX7 book.
Right.
And then I started programming sounds for companies, and working in a music studio, and also writing articles. And all those three things, they how do you say, like, they cross-pollinated to each other, like, they would no working day I had at the time was the same. So I got some piece of gear for a review. I took it to the studio, put it through its paces, and then wrote the review about it. And so it was a great life at the time. I was a freelancer. And then eventually, we're probably going to touch on that a little bit later, I started my first company, and that again changed my life, because I'm anything but not somebody who should run a company, to be honest.
So those early adventures with FM, the DX7, you wrote a book and you were programming the DX7.
Yeah.
You're a better man than me, mate. I couldn't work out FM for the fucking life of me. I just could not work it out.
You know what? And you're not alone. I'm 1 in 1,000 people actually like this stuff, apparently. But it really, it was weird. So obviously, subtractive synthesis or analog synthesis, you can get the hang of that pretty easily. You don't have to study anything.
Yeah.
FM seems to be incredibly difficult for people. And, believe me or not, when I got my DX7, I got it on a Saturday around lunchtime. I had a gig in the evening, and I programmed my whole set on the thing, never having done anything with FM, within like 3 or 4 hours. And I've never found anything difficult about it. It must be something like, I don't know, 3,000 years ago, there was already FM, and I was living in that.
or your brain just works in sine waves, I think is what it is. Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know. So I can't explain it to you. You could wake me up at 3 a.m. and go, here, Peter, here's a sample. Can you make a DX7 patch that's as close as possible to that? And I'll do it.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. I just came from analog subtractive, so I had a Korg Monopoly was my first synth, right? So yours is an MS-20, the MS-20. Mine was a Korg Monopoly, and I had a Poly 6. I had a paired. They were my first 2 pairs.
Yeah, I had all of those too.
But then I got my big monster, which I should never have sold, but that's another story, which is my Jupiter 8. And
God, never had one of those.
Let's not go there. Yeah. Stupid me sold it. And so I had those 3, and I think I had I think it was a Mirage had joined the lighter back then. But I was just an analog synth head. So all of a sudden I'm in front of this DX and there's no knobs to grab.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, what the fuck do I do here? Right. And there's all these tables and stuff, and I'm hearing bells and door chimes, and I'm like, I said, I don't think I can actually implement this. But when I saw the DX7 in the hands of like really proficient players, I just went, I get it now, you know. So yeah, look, it was something. You're a better man than me. And the only FM thing that I've still got to this day is a TG77. I never touch the FM side of it.
Yeah. You know, what fascinated me about FM at the time, it was the only. So you know, until a certain point, that probably like 20 years ago. So for me, it was always about, you know, how can I create something new that I haven't heard before? Which is now like one of the most tried phrases. And yeah, I'm pretty sure I've heard everything. We all have heard everything by now. But at the time, you know, the DX7 was such a total revolution. Like it created stuff that I had never heard before.
Yeah.
Plus it was extremely logical and mathematical. I mean, the path from, okay, I want this sound to actually getting it into the DX7, that was never logical. There was a lot of ears and imagination involved, but the way it worked, the way of understanding the synthesis was even more logical than analog. It was just, that's not how many people approached it.
No, I think we were just used to that whole left to right. You know, we've got an oscillator and then we run it through a filter, and then we've got, you know, ADSRs for the filter and the the amplifier, and then we've got some LFOs for some modulation. Anything outside of that, too hard, you know. So
totally.
But then, you know, you've got, you know, we had synths like the D50 that was the kind of like the pushback against the DX7. Remember, right? And you know, with the linear arithmetic, or LA, which had all those tiny little samples and stuff. And that, I remember that was absolute revelation to me. I'm like, wow, that is, okay, now I'm getting digital. I'm getting it, you know. And then the K2000 came and just, that whole vast thing just blew my brain again. But see, we're getting sidetracked. But yeah, look, it is, I was just fascinated that the DX was something that you picked up on first and actually excelled at, you know. I mean, you wrote a book about it, so, you know. Before
I wrote a book, actually, that was the first time I made some, you know, serious money for the time. The DX7 was at a time where you could still sell data sheets. Do you remember these things where, you know, you put numbers on, you know, onto an empty patch sheet, and people would pay for those? I had I had three sounds at the time. I had three sounds: CP70, which sounded nothing like CP70, of course. Yeah, of course. A Rhodes, which sounded nothing like a Rhodes, and a grand piano, and people paid, you know, by today's standards, $10 for each of them. I made $2,000 every month.
What?
Shipping, yes,
for three sounds.
Shipping. That's what every live keyboardist wanted, because you couldn't do that on an analog synthesizer, and samplers weren't there, right? So and nobody wanted to program the DX7. So that's what even gave me the idea, because I was surprised. I was the most surprised person myself. Like, I can make people. Other people don't make these sounds. I mean, what? It's so simple. So the book came about at some time when I got this book from John Chowning and Dave Bristow at the time. You know, the people who made FM big and, you know, were very involved in the DX7. And I read that book and I thought, that's a great book, but nobody talks about how you can actually work with the synthesizer. So that's what I did. It was less about theory, but more like, okay, here's how you make strings, here's how you create a brass sound. And I always try to translate from what might people have in their heads to how can they actually translate that to the synthesizer. That was my approach. It was less theoretical and more practical. Yeah. And also I explained the synthesizer a little bit more hands-on. So this is what the unison control on a DX7-2 is for, you know, stuff like that.
Yeah, of course. Now, you took that approach to probably your next adventure. We'll call it, well, not an adventure, but, you know, when your next, it would be an adventure when you went into becoming a reviewer for a magazine in the 90s. So,
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Can you tell us about that, please?
Yeah. So in America, you had Keyboard magazine, right?
Yeah, I've got a shelf full of them. Yep.
I don't know what you had in Australia, but, you know, in America, Keyboard magazine was all the rage. And we had the same thing in Germany called Keyboards magazine,
Right.
Because keyboards is plural for keyboard, and so I think that was the distinction. I don't know.
Yep.
And it had like 200,000 subscribers, which in Germany is huge. We were probably like 60 million people at the time, so it was really something. Like everybody everybody who played keyboards or had a synthesizer would read Keyboard magazine. There was not a lot of competition. And eventually they did a review of my little DX7 book, and I got their attention, and they invited me. And I remember, walking out of the editorial office there this evening, I thought, hey, I could die now. My life's complete. I made Keyboards magazine. I was you have no idea how proud I was. I had read this magazine for years, and went to the railway station every month, bought it with my pocket money, and eventually I was there. And it was an adventure, because I remember when I got my first synthesizer for review, it was the Waldorf microwave.
Yes. And
there was something that didn't work for me in all those magazines, and that was how people, how the reviewers took themselves and the gear and the business so seriously.
Yeah.
And I basically went to my chief editor and said, like, I know this is going to be my first article, but, would you let me write it my way? And then you can tell me it's total shit and I'll rewrite it, but, I at least can I have a go? And he said, yeah, of course. And I did it. And he said, you know what? We're going to print exactly that. Nice. And that became that's probably the secret of why I became so popular, because people liked somebody not taking the industry so seriously. Manufacturers hated it, of course. I don't know. I don't know how many ad cancellations I caused that magazine, but on the other hand, I brought them a lot of subscribers at the time, and I had a lot of haters too, which is a good sign sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I know that feeling.
Yeah, and I ended up never working, but writing for them for, I don't know, 12, 13 years or so. I wrote over 300 articles, eventually moving on from reviews, which can be really ungrateful. Like, they can be ungrateful because the manufacturer hates you when you're honest, or people who've already bought that piece of gear that you're ripping apart, they'll hate you as well, right? So eventually I moved on to writing more like synth programming workshops or tutorials, and everybody loves you. You're not harming anyone.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, that was a great time.
And look, it's interesting just hearing your approach to that, because look, I've been wanting to do a show on the music tech journalism for a long, long time, and I've asked a few industry friends and colleagues that have been involved in it, and they don't want to go near it. It's like one of these landmine subjects that people don't want to approach, right?
Oh, yes, it is.
And what I find intriguing in what you've just said is that, you were honest and you were pissing off the manufacturers.
Yep.
And so my American keyboard magazine, so you were saying what do we have here in Australia? We had a local one, which was basically it was pooling articles from UK and overseas, and there was some local people as well. But it was like this little boys' club, right? And if you're not in a club, you're not in a club, right? And it was this highbrow type of I just hated it. But with the American keyboard magazine, and I watched the change, and also with Sound on Sound in UK, which were my two main magazines that I've been subscribing to over the years. But my keyboard magazine, I was the same with you. I'd go to the newsagent, get my keyboard magazine. I've got stuff going back to at least 1989, I think. No, sorry. No. At 81. 81.
Wow.
Because I remember Geddy Lee was on the cover of one of them, and that was when he was Tom Sawyer. Remember, the Tom Sawyer song with the Moog, with the Moog solo? So he's on the cover of one of the first magazines I've got, and I've got a shelf with keyboard magazines from I think that's 80, 81, all the way up to into the 2000s, and then it was just getting thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner, and the reviews were no longer reviews; they were becoming just kind of glorified ad copy.
Yeah.
And the same was actually happening with Sound on Sound. And this is not me. I don't want to kind of just sit there and put shade on these magazines, because I can understand the dynamics to this. You have to deliver a review without pissing off the reviewers. But if the product's shit, how do you approach it? Well, you don't publish the review. Now, I've had some experience where I've been working for companies that have been representing some really expensive high-end gear. And it was at a time where you didn't read bad reviews, Peter. There's just the bad reviews were like very few and far between. I can actually remember the last couple, and I remember the fallout. And what I've felt, because I've actually stopped all subscriptions, because to me the reviews are no longer, they don't feel like reviews anymore, Peter. There's no,
Sure.
They just feel like, okay, we've got to cover our ass here. We don't want to go pissing anyone off. And again, I don't want to kind of cast shade on, because some of these guys actually do some really reasonable, thorough reviews, but I can't remember a bad review. Do you know what I mean, Peter? There is,
yeah, of course.
There is no bad review. And like I said, I remember one of the last ones, and I remember the fallout, and I got dragged in the middle of it as well, which we won't go into the detail of. But from that point, the reviews changed, right, to the point where they're like, when they got the pros and the cons, and the cons are not even, don't even bother putting a con, right? And there was no in-depth analysis of stuff. There was no technical measurements. It was just very much, here's your ad copy. Here are the features of the whether it's the software or the instrument or the interface, for example, and that's it. And it was just so watered down, I actually stopped all my subscriptions. And I mean, I got to the point where I've just said, there's no point me investing and funding this anymore, because I might as well just go to the website and read the ad copy. Now, maybe it might be an extreme view, but I'd love to get your view on how you see the modern tech journalism, because it has shifted away from kind of print media more to internet and YouTube commentating and all of that type of stuff. So do you have any thoughts on that at all?
I'm still following it, but let me tell you a little bit about why those 10 years, between 89 and 99 were so very different from how the world is today. I was almost like I was blessed at the time. I had a chief editor with balls of steel. And, seriously, I mean, there was nothing he wouldn't print. I had total freedom. I was never exposed to furious product managers or anything, right? So, and then they knew what they had in me. And, I think it was, business-wise, it was great for them, because in the end, your money's in the subscribers. The more subscribers you have, the more ads you get. And if a big Japanese company cancels their ads for 1 year, that's a hit, but 3 others will come, for them. So I think at the time they understood we have to be relevant. And that changed. And I would say the line of demarcation for that is simply the internet. Because when I wrote for Keyboard Magazine, there was a single source for people where they got their reviews. And, of course, and I would say it's much better these days. But so just to tell you my story, and that changed for me as well, even at Keyboards Magazine, to a degree that eventually I stopped doing reviews, because I thought, okay, guys, write your reviews the way you want, but I'll prefer tutorials and workshops, and then eventually stopped writing altogether, because the pressure from the industry eventually became so big that they had to make too many compromises for my taste. Today, when you're asking me about today, not talking about print magazines, because we all know what's been going on in the last 20, 30 years, how many amazing people are not writing anymore. On the other hand, I just had this discussion with somebody a few weeks ago. I think for me as a user, or for me as a customer, it's never been better than today because, I don't read any reviews anymore really, but I watch YouTube videos. There's a lot of really, really good influencers out there who also are not financially depending on ads, or, not always, but, pretty much make their money with, their number of subscribers and, the weight in the market they have. And they can be pretty frank. So when I want to see somebody destroying a product, I go to YouTube these days. No, it's not like it's not like I wake up and go, I want to see somebody destroying a product. But, what you said, Vin, like when you want to see a review that's, let's like honest and, I always felt when I wrote for Keyboards Magazine, I always felt like my customer is the reader. I don't want a single person, like I did, work all summer to afford something for $2,000 or something, and then buy a piece of shit because I wrote a great review about this thing because, I wanted to make the advertiser happy.
Yeah.
And we had ways, I remember one review where my chief editor actually said, can you be just,
can you tone
a little
it down
bit
a bit?
friendly? Yeah. And so in the end, we had our pros and cons section there. And I wrote no cons. And my pro was long power cable. That's don't have to be so negative. It was a great power cable.
Yeah, that's awesome, Peter. That's awesome. And no doubt there is some good commentators on YouTube, but there's also some that.
Undoubtedly, yeah. But Vin, sorry to interrupt you, but people are also so much more educated these days than like I was in the early 80s because they're exposed to so much bullshit, but they're also exposed to so much, real stuff. Like, for me, it was completely impossible to hear somebody demonstrate a Fairlight synthesizer. For example, when I was like 15 or so.
Yeah. Right.
These days, when I want to know how something sounds, I don't have to go to a store anymore. In Germany, you hardly can go to a store anymore.
Yeah, same here. Yeah, same here.
Yes. Okay. So then it's the same. But I can get all the info I need and, make up my own mind just from YouTube videos. It doesn't have to be reviews. It can just be demo shows or whatever. There's so much audio video stuff these days, which was unthinkable for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, and one other thing, and when I was talking about the dynamic of advertiser versus content, I have a close friend that has a high profile product that was in line to be reviewed, and they just said, no worries, we're happy to review this, and then they send him an advertising price list. Right?
Oh, that's very normal. Yeah, that's very normal these days too. Yeah.
And then they say, well, how much of a review? And I'm kind of using, I'm doing air quotes. How much of a review would you like? Would you like, a couple of paragraphs? Would you like a quarter of a page? Would you like a half a page? And it was scaled up against the advertising budget. And I'm looking at it, and my eyes were just watering. And I just thought, and I encountered that personally as well here with some local content and advertising my company in the early days. And I know for a fact that, remember I was talking about the boys club? I know for a fact that other people were paying way less, right?
Oh yeah,
because I wasn't part of the club, and I'm like, fuck that. I'm not even going to entertain that. Yeah.
Yeah.
You were talking about where you had to go to hear stuff back then, and I remember sending away to, I think it was Roland at the time. Might have been Yamaha, where they would send you a cassette with a bunch of demos on it of their stuff, and that was really about the only thing you could do.
Yes, I remember those.
That or go into the music store, and I still remember going into the music stores with those big A-frame rack. Remember those I've still got two of them, by the way. Those big 3 or 4 tier A-frame racks with synthesizers everywhere. There would be Jupiter 8s, there'd be OB8s, OBXAs, and Prophet 5s, and you're kind of sitting there going, blah, 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 blah. I kind of...
Right. But you had to be careful, though, because the like the music store I worked at wasn't allowed to have Yamaha instruments in it at the time because, there's always those weird protectionism things going on.
The politics. Yeah, of course. Yeah, dealership politics. Yeah.
And I remember, we had a huge music store like just 10 kilometers from where I lived when I was 16, 17, 18. So I could go there, on my bike, and they had everything. But they also had this cranky asshole whose only job it was, to keep you at arm's length from anything that was interesting.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. But I love the idea of you taking your bike back with a synthesizer loaded on the back of it. Just like, yeah, why not?
No, I didn't do that.
Yeah, amazing.
But Vin, so I've, back to what you mentioned in terms of buying reviews, of course, I'm pretty sure that was a reality even when I wrote at keyboards. I just was, I don't know, I had this special role. I was protected from that. I never saw that for myself. But in my companies, of course, and, in the larger companies I worked with, of course, I saw this happening, and I saw how different it is. Just to give you an example, as Wizoo, we did most of our instruments with Steinberg. So Steinberg, of course, would take care of marketing, distribution, all that stuff. They were much better than us with that. But at some point, we did 2 instruments, and we did all ourselves. And of course, we got those price lists and everything. And then when we joined DigiDesign, to me, it was like a different planet. It was a complete miracle to me. It was like we did this freeware instrument, X-Pan it was called at the time, that you could get for Pro Tools. And whatever we did, even this thing automatically made it on title pages of major magazines. And it was those magazines actually begging DigiDesign for getting gear to be reviewed. So, it was exactly the other way around. And that taught me a lot at the time about how this works and how you can play it.
Yeah. Now, let's rewind a bit because we kind of jump forward.
Yeah, sure.
Because during that time, during the 90s, while you were working as the reviewer, doing your reviewing and your journalism, you're also collaborating with some synthesizer manufacturers. And I'm looking at the list of names here, Peter, and these are quite impressive. So can you kind of give us like some overview of your days of collaborating with those hardware synthesizer manufacturers? Because you were doing patch programming, from my understanding, or were you doing more than that?
That depends on the manufacturer. So for Kawai, for example, Kawai was probably my favorite collaboration in terms of how much impact I had, or how much they would listen to me. That was exactly the mid-90s. I think that was 1995. And I got a call from their European distributor. Would I join him to Japan to look at something that Kawai was working on? And that eventually became the K5000 synthesizer.
Oh, yeah. It was additive, wasn't it? Was it additive or granular? It was additive, I thought.
Yeah, it was additive. It was additive.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, and and I remember, to me, flying to, I've never been in Japan. It was all a different world. Of course, and I was at the time, 95, I wasn't even, how old was I? I was 30 or so.
Yeah.
So big honor to me. And so apparently they had brought teams one from Australia, actually, one from the US. We were the European guys. And so we did brainstorming sessions about the concept. So they presented their ideas of the K5000, what they wanted it to be. And they were really open at that time. So they did it in time for us to actually really make changes. And we made significant changes to the synthesizer. Like, for example, they planned something a little bit closer to the D50 that you mentioned, Vin, like a combination of short attack samples and then the additive synthesis. And we kind of talked them out of that idea because it also didn't sound very good. And encouraged them to focus more on the additive synthesis, which was amazing in the K5000.
Yeah, it was.
And I think our group, it was because of our group that there was a K5000S that was the smaller model with the controller. It had a little, like a macro knob, extra thing on top of the front panel. We really had a say And although the K5000 wasn't a big success, eventually Kawai basically paid me money every month just for, if you ever have an idea, maybe you could send the email to us. And, that had happened before because, not that Kawai were the only ones offering me money. I was very flattered because of that. But it happened before, you, and maybe Vin, if you've written, or Pete, if you've written for magazines, you've seen that as well. Like, I got invited to a lot of brainstorming sessions in companies because they thought, that asshole's going to do the review. Better we, involve him before he destroys us. Better we make him a friend.
Mm-hmm.
But with Kawai, they were really, really serious. And what came out of that was I just had the idea, not a spark of genius or anything. It was, at the time, it was pretty obvious. I sent them a concept for a stage piano. Because, you kept seeing all those, you still, to this day, you still see Rhodes pianos and Wurlitzer pianos. It's probably more, the Red Nord keyboards now, but at the time it was, Wurlitzer and Rhodes pianos. And I thought, like, why is that? They're heavy, probably unaffordable for a lot of people. Digital sounds are good enough. Why not, make a stage piano that looks as good as them, is as simple as them, more affordable, lightweight. And that eventually became the MP9000.
Right.
In the end, the whole MP series that came out of that. So that to me that's why I'm saying that was my favorite collaboration, because I had so much say and, so much openness. And it was, the Japanese were so amazing to work with. But yeah, with Nord, it was more like friendship, super friendly people, Swedish.
Yeah.
I was only involved in the Nord modular. I built modular synthesizer models for the Nord modular at the time.
And that's not exactly a bad thing to be involved with. That was an amazing instrument. It was one of the first instruments from memory, wasn't it? Or was it the little Nord lead? Modular was first.
Nord lead was how they had basically made their money, and Nord modular was, like the next step for them. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I've got some nice memories of Nord because, like in those middle 90s, when I, in my past life working for one of these pro audio places, I had this space just stacked with every synthesizer known to man, and we were one of the first guys to have the Nord, and of course the rep came and gave me the Nord modular, and I was like a pig in shit. I'm like, this is incredible. But the end users are going, oh, fuck, I need to learn how to program this thing and patch it. And I'm going, and then the Nord lead came out, and that was the bread and butter, but I still love my Nord modular. Yeah, sorry, I digress.
No, that's totally fine. But, I'll give you, so from a sound designer's perspective, so I remember I got one of the first prototypes of the Nord modular from Hans Nordelius, I think was the name of the guy, amazing guy. And they basically contracted me to do, I think, 50, models. And the model was always, it was a setup of the modules and then also patches for them, right? Like you created the setup and then you created, for that setup, you create a bunch of patches. So it was an enormous amount of work. And after weeks and weeks of that, which I enjoyed very much, I got a call from Hans Nordelius and he said, Peter, I hate to say this, but we had to change the LFOs in the modular, and I'm afraid you have to do everything. You have to start over again. So, I think at the time I worked for pretty much everybody except for any American company, like a lot of German and Japanese companies.
So I see Waldorf as the list here as well.
Waldorf was special. Waldorf was very special.
Yeah.
Because, through my review for the microwave.
Yep.
And then also I wrote the review for Keyboards Magazine for the Wave.
The Wave
as well.
That's one of my bucket list synths.
Right.
Yeah, and it was for me, it was completely unaffordable. And of course,
for everyone.
You didn't, yeah, exactly. And of course you didn't get it for the review, right? So I remember I had done the review, I had done a whole feature about it. I had actually brought together the three most prominent wave users, like keyboard players, producers who had a wave in Germany for an interview, all that kind of stuff. After that, I got a call from Wolfgang Düren, the CEO of Waldorf at the time, or the founder of Waldorf. And he said, like, Peter, I had this idea, would you be intrigued to do a sample CD of the wave? Because so many people can't afford this thing. And the idea is just, program your best patches on the thing, sample them on an archive sampler, and we're going to distribute it. And I said, well, that sounds amazing. What do you have in mind for pay? He said, like, I'll give you half the wave. So you just pay me half of it. And obviously I scratched together the rest. Yeah. That was the one I never did patches for the wave. That was all done by, no patches that went into the actual synthesizer. I only did the patches that got sampled. And the CD was a collaboration between Waldorf and Arkai. And it was pretty successful because, of course, if you could buy a CD, an Arkai sample CD for $100 and, had some really amazing wave sounds, that was attractive to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Unprecedented at the time, too. I mean, that's very forward thinking of them.
Yeah. Hey, so did you have the 61 key or the 76 key, Peter?
Oh, no, I had the 60. I had the meager 61, the modest 61 key.
Yeah, Vin, how much do you think they're going to pay him, Vin?
Yeah, I know. Well, hang on. I've got a wave story. It won't take long, all right? A wave story from Australia. One of my closest friends back in the day, he bought a wave. So he ordered the wave. There was a 61 key wave. And we were both working at this pro audio place side by side, and this thing rolls up and it's in this massive road case, so it's come across from Germany, it's landed at the Australian distributor, it's come from, which was in Sydney, and then it went from Sydney to Melbourne, and there's this massive road case, and it kind of gets trucked in, and we open it up. It's like a kids in a candy store, and it's all kind of wrapped in heavy plastic. We're like, fuck, this thing's going to be awesome. And so we kind of carefully start ripping the plastic off. And then once we get the plastic off the top of it, it's still sitting in the road case, right? You got to picture this, and we look down and we went, oh fuck! And there was, you got the LCD screen in the middle of the thing, and from the top right hand corner, from the LCD screen to the top right hand corner of the panel, that was smashed. It was just this crack. Oh, no. It had been smashed in transit, and we just kind of went, oh fuck! Now what? And of course, we're ringing the distributor. They don't know whether it got damaged in Australia or whether it got damaged in the trip from Germany to Australia. And no one's taken responsibility for it. Now, this thing was like a $15,000 Australian.
Yes,
kind of
$15,000. Yeah,
it was $15,000 Australian. And we're just looking at it, and the blood's just drained out of my face. And my friend is just devastated. He's going, "What the fuck?" So of course it's gone back to Sydney, and there's all this negotiation going on because it took ages because these were special orders, and they just said, "Look, I tell you what, we will take it back. We'll send you a 76 key." As a replacement. Now, from memory, I think this 76 key thing landed. Now, I'm getting a bit fuzzy here, right? But I can't remember what the end thing was, but I think he ended up with 2 K2500s instead. Something went a little bit west, or maybe the 70s. Maybe I don't think it actually arrived. So that was my wave story. We didn't even get to turn it on, didn't even get to hear it because the thing had been smashed in transit.
Oh no,
that's a tragic story.
That's a tragic story, exactly.
That's just like wow. So yeah, there's my wave story.
It was attacked by drop bears in Australia.
The drop bears got it. Fucking things. Yeah.
My wave story was much better, but for me, I mean, not the story.
Do you still have it?
No. You know what? So the wave to me was. I remember this thing was never just a synthesizer for me. It was like I've never felt unworthy in front of a piece of gear before I got the wave.
It's like me and my Jupiter 8. I'm like, how the hell am I owning this thing? Yeah.
So the feeling, and it was almost like it was like a she for me. It was like adorable and blah blah blah. And anyway, I remember after I started Wizoo, and my day was so full with just running or building a company. I remember at some point I went to my office. The wave sat there, and it looked at me and, when have you last played me?
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, that's the moment, and I sold it at the time. I've never regretted it. You come across as a bit of a collector, Vin. I'm the exact opposite of that. I have like almost no hardware left. I've never collected any. I don't have my magazine articles or anything. I never collect anything.
I'm not the collector. The other fella.
This whole thing is just reeking of tragedy. I just like
Pete's the collector. He's got literally he's sitting in his basement surrounded by hardware synthesizers.
Wow!
I've still got some of my hardware, but I sold all my analog, and I don't want to go. I don't want to tell the story again because I'll start getting depressed. But I've still got all of my 90s digital. My digital beauties,
Yeah. Good for you. Absolutely good for you.
Yeah, but they're not going anywhere. But I did sell my 80s, late 70s and 80s analog, which I'm starting to get depressed again.
But you know what I have? Oh, sorry, I thought you were done.
No, go.
So you know what I have? I have two pieces of hardware. One is the Moog Matriarch, just because I love the Moog Matriarch.
Yeah,
beautiful.
It was more like to play with.
They sound fantastic.
Yep.
Yes. And I'll probably not give it away. But the one thing that I will, they have to pry off my cold hands. I have the last Korg MS-20 ever built, signed by Mr. Fumio Maeda.
Amazing.
And it's just, it's a lot worth to me, probably not to anyone else, but to me, it's the world,
Yeah. That'd be awesome. Yeah.
But I think we've understood where Peter's like how we know when he really likes something. It's just like, I'll probably not give it away. That's when he loves something.
Well, pride from my dying hands, I think was a clue.
Well, that was the exceptional one.
Yes.
That was the exceptional. There you go.
Yeah.
Now we can keep talking about synths for another hour, but we don't have it. This could end up a 5-hour show. So I think maybe we should move on a little bit. Let's move on to the Wizoo. So that was 1997, if I'm correct.
Yes.
Co-founding of Wizoo. So can you just give us an overview of how that what led you to the founding of Wizoo?
Yes, and that's a really weird story, because I would love to tell you, I was thinking strategically, I should blah, blah, blah. And then I got investors and it all scaled very well and blah. It was the exact opposite. It was keyboards. So you have to bear with me for a minute or two. So Keyboards magazine ran a survey among their readers, like many magazines did at the time. And it was conducted by some university in Munich. And the professor conducting the survey eventually called my chief editor and said, do you have a guy called Gorges? And he said, yes, he's one of our writers. And the guy said, yeah, what's weird? He's on 95% of the questionnaires. And my chief editor said, that's great, right? Yeah, he said, yeah, except we're not asking for authors. And so from that moment on, at Keyboards magazine, I was called Honecker, because that was the leader of the former GDR who always got 95% in all the elections.
Oh, right.
And what does that have to do with the founding of Wizoo? It led them to believe that I'm so popular, they want to monetize that. And at the time, I was, as we've covered, I was writing books, I was writing articles, I was programming sounds, I was doing sample CDs, but I could see that the fees I was making wouldn't last forever. And I could already see that writing reviews became less and less fun. So I thought, if I get this offer, and, I was so naive, I believed I could actually run a company. I would be the right guy just because I knew everything the company would do. I would be in the perfect position. And their offer was amazing. They basically said, look, we pay for everything. We the money, the distribution comes from us. You just be you, and you just do books and CD-ROMs and, find authors, blah, blah, blah. And that was the founding of Wizoo. And we founded it 50, I had 50% of the shares. I didn't even know what that meant at the time, really. And so I found a bunch of, I called a bunch of my, book writing and article writing friends, and thought up a catalog of books, and then found some of my synthesizer and sound designer friends, and we did a bunch of CD-ROMs. And Keyboards Magazine apparently had, they could place ads, so we got full page color ads in Keyboards Magazine. So we got popular pretty quickly, and it actually made some money. But a year or two later, the publishing company of Keyboards Magazine got sold.
Oh.
And so the general manager of my company went to me and said, like, you know what, they want to buy the publishing company, but they don't want to buy CD-ROMs or books. You have 3 months to find some money and buy it from them, or they just burn the whole shit. And fast forward, I spent 3 months finding the money and eventually bought them out and restarted Wizoo at Y2K, 1st of January 2000.
Wow. Okay.
And then it was my company, and we continued doing. To this day, I don't know how I didn't go broke within 3 weeks, but it worked. No, and I'm not seriously. I am serious. I had no business jobs. Everything was trial and error. Yeah, I could do. I could put numbers in an Excel sheet, but I didn't understand anything about managing people, about taxes, about payroll, all these things. I had no idea. I stumbled into everything.
Flying by the seat of your pants.
Exactly. Yeah. But that's a good way to put it. And then in 1999, I had this idea that I had a product idea that I felt Wizoo was a little bit too small for, and that was CD-ROMs with multi-track drum performances that are also recycled. You guys remember the Rex format, right?
Oh yeah, of course.
Rex format,
of course, yeah.
So you could change the tempo. So I went to Steinberg. Never had any contact with them. I was always an Imagic guy or C-Lab before, which is Apple Logic.
Oh boy, you were the enemy.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But they weren't available anymore for that kind of stuff. So I just went to Steinberg and we did that series, and it was really successful. And I became friends with Manfred Rürup. I don't know if the name rings a bell with you guys.
He's the co-founder of Steinberg, isn't he?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he, co-founder, and he was the CEO of Steinberg.
Yes.
Charlie Steinberg was the Steinberg. Charlie was the brain. He was the genius developer. And so Charlie and Manfred eventually, when they saw that I have a small team and we can build instruments, they had just invented VST, if you will. Charlie had just invented VST, and they had done the what was it called? Model E or whatever synthesizer.
Yeah, the Moog. The Moog.
Yeah, exactly. The Mini Moog.
Yep.
And we collaborated on the samples for the LM4 drum machine.
Yes,
so
I remember that. I used that. Yes.
Huge success, this thing. And then through my friendship with Kawai, I wanted to do the first virtual piano ever. That was the holy grail to me at the time. That was something that hadn't been done before. And so I went to Kawai, and they let us use their anechoic chamber in Hamamatsu, in their piano factory. And they gave us their best, Kawai EX grand piano for 3 weeks and a tuner. And so we sampled that piano, and that eventually turned into the grand.
Yes.
That Steinberg put out.
And which I used extensively. And get this, and I don't want to sidetrack you too far, I called up some old tracks that I had archived from over 20 years ago, and this piano on some of these tracks. I've gone, what was that piano? And I looked at the the Cubase thing, and I've gone, oh, the grand. There you go.
Yeah.
And this is only last couple of weeks, Peter.
Wow.
that the grand re-entered my space. So there you go. Amazing.
Yeah, and the grand was. Everything was so exciting for me at the time. I felt like, wow, I get to work with Kawai, and the Steinberg guys are listening to me, and we're doing the first virtual piano. So I felt like, I felt like the first guy on the Mount Everest in my business.
First man on the moon.
Yeah.
I mean, for virtual piano, it's not far off. It's come that far since then as well.
Yeah, but it was amazing at the time though.
Yeah.
I mean, that instrument was so far ahead of anything else that was available.
It was. I was a bit of that was luck, because I found this guy Claudius Brüse, who is the guy who invented the Waldorf wave, like the guy who wrote the spec sheet.
Yes. Right.
And we had become friends in the meantime. And he was also this the classically trained composer and pianist and stuff. And Claudius had a bunch of really amazing and groundbreaking ideas for how, not just sampling the piano, but also make it behave like a real piano, like repedaling, for example, or the string resonances, which was unheard of in samplers at the time. So it was pretty revolutionary. But of course, now there's so many virtual pianos out there that are as good or better. But yeah, I mean, that was more than 20 years ago.
So with your joining forces with Steinberg, you did launch a this is what I refer to as the controversial instrument.
Yes. Oh man, I can't tell you how much enjoyed that one.
Yeah. So let's dive into that one, because I'm going to have a chuckle over this, because I remember the fallout with this one. So
yeah,
off you go.
Okay. No, it's really an interesting story, because I mentioned the VST drum sessions. The drums, multi-track, recycled in Cubase, and so a guy in Sweden called Sven Bornemark, pretty genius guy, amazing musician. He called Steinberg, said, I have an idea for this, blah, blah, blah. And they put him through to me. And he said to me, VST drum sessions, that's amazing. Don't you want to do it for guitar? I said, man, but there's a tiny detail. It's like 12 keys times whatever, 7 chords. It's impossible to do. You'll have to find somebody who builds you some kind of engine. It's not possible as Rex files. Yeah. And that was pretty much it for me at the time. And also I have to admit, I wasn't as visionary. I wasn't that interested in a guitar. And then 3 or 4 months later, he gave me a call and said, can you come to the Steinberg headquarters next week? I found a guy and we want to demo you something. And he had found this British guy, Paul Kellett, who had this little plugin company, MDA. I think it was called MDA freeware plugins.
Yeah. I remember him. I remember him distinctly. Yeah.
And funnily, Paul and we had a Zoom session today, because since then he's been working with me in all my companies. Like, Paul's the genius developer behind everything. Or a lot of the instruments that we've done. Amazing.
6 degrees of separation, isn't it?
Yeah. So anyway, that's the first. So I went to Hamburg. There was this guy. He was very, Paul, he was very shy, and Sven, and they demonstrated their first prototype, and everybody was blown away. Of course, there was something playing guitar. And you guys will remember, at the time, all you had was guitar samples on a sampler, and they sounded shit. They didn't sound real.
Yeah, I mean, you had to try and play the riffs and all the chord fingerings and actually progressions and all of that is very, very different on a keyboard to a guitar. The voicings are very different as well. Yeah.
And plus the guitar has 2 ways of strumming and the keyboard doesn't, and all these things.
Yep.
But this thing actually worked, and so Steinberg agreed to doing it, and then fast forward, Frankfurt Music Messe 2002. We presented the thing, and I remember Steinberg did something the evening before the actual messe show of what, I don't know, put something in their forum or on their website. And as you mentioned, Vin, the reactions were like, controversy is putting it mildly.
We should tell the listeners what the actual product's called, because we've actually bypassed that.
Oh, have we?
Yeah.
Virtual guitarist.
Virtual guitarist. Yep, that's the one.
Yeah, exactly. And so, of course, the funny thing is, somebody pointed me to it at the evening. I think I was still at the booth preparing for the next day. And somebody pointed me to it, and we looked at it at the hotel room, because you had no cell phone with internet on it at the time. And I was like, what's happening here? Nobody can have seen it. Nobody can have heard it. There were no demos. There were no images, nothing. And people already had strong opinions about this thing.
They'd lost their minds over it.
Oh.
Totally. I mean, they went batshit crazy on that forum, right?
Of course. That's how forums work, right? You don't have to know anything about the product to comment on it.
Don't let the truth get in the way of a good story.
Yeah. And, and I was very self-conscious about this. And I remember, mentioning, I think I ran into Manfred, in the morning at breakfast. And I said, Manfred, have you seen the forum? And I was expecting him to go, yeah, you know what? We're taking this product down. It's not going to happen. And Manfred said to me, that tells you have a real winner.
Yeah. You're over the target. Yeah. You're over the target. Yeah.
We should clarify, Peter, that because we didn't say what the forum's response actually was other than batshit crazy. I think we can all deduce it, but I'm guessing it was batshit crazy, not in favor of the product.
Not in favor of, look, pretty much the same reaction that the first drum machine had got, the first sequencer had got, the first
synthesizer
sampler. Yeah, exactly. This is the death of music. You're putting musicians out of a job.
Work,
blah, 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 blah. The same stuff, but way more emotional. Yeah. Because apparently guitarists really felt threatened by the keyboard nerds now, right? And also, people hadn't really understood what our intention was. We all knew, everybody involved in virtual guitarists knew this is never going to replace a guitarist. A guitar probably does 100,000 things. This thing probably does 100 things. It does these things reasonably well. And, they allow you, if you have no access to a guitarist and you don't play the guitar, to use this kind of stuff in your Cubase tracks. That's all we had in mind. And people really thought we were, wiping guitarists off the face of the earth.
Well, one of your quotes, which I've actually listed down in a response to the forum, which I think is great, and I'm going to repeat it here. It says, you said, we're not trying to replace guitarists. We're trying to replace no guitarist.
Exactly. That was my quote at the time. That's what I told everybody.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. And, it became the most successful virtual instrument in Steinberg. Probably to this day. I don't know. Yeah.
And also you should make a note, when Steinberg did a survey of who was actually buying it, who was actually buying it, Peter?
Yeah, that was interesting too. Thanks for reminding me. That was a surprise as well for us. That was a few years later. We had done an electric edition, like an extra electric edition with a genius guitarist called Thomas Blug. So, 1 or 2 years into the whole thing. Yeah, they found out 50% of the people buying virtual guitarists were guitarists. These days, it's not a big surprise because if you're a professional photographer, chances are you carry an iPhone and you take a lot of photos with your iPhone. That's exactly the same reasons. They used it for demos. They used it for maybe something that wasn't important enough to, to set up their guitar and actually practice something. It was a convenience thing for them. It was, again, I'll say to this day, it has never sounded as good as a super, super professional guitarist playing a full performance, but it was convincing enough.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And I could imagine the backlash because I remember those forums, man. They were just, they were so, it was like the Wild West back then. Myself and Pete have had numerous discussions over the years on the podcast about just how volatile it was back then. And Pete probably thinks that they're still the same now. They're not, Pete. I mean, as toxic as some of the forums can be now, compared to the early 2000s, this is like, mate, there's nothing.
Plus, Vin, I was surprised. It's also a matter of which company. So Steinberg had the most vicious user community.
Oh, still has. Still
probably
has.
Still has. I haven't followed it lately, but whatever Steinberg put out, the first reaction was always, hey, you fuckers, fix my Cubase first. Nobody needs this, blah, 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 blah. The vitriol all the time.
Yeah, fix the bugs. We don't give a shit about new features.
Exactly. don't waste your time. Don't waste your time on this piece of shit. Fix that, blah, 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 bug. I've been sending you guys 20 times, blah, that kind of stuff.
Yep.
But, but the contrast, and that's why I'm saying it also depends on the company. Apparently, DigiDesign the DUC, the DigiDesign user community was much different because people were more serious.
Oh, no.
Not particularly more loving, they had a different way of expressing their hate. But very different was, when I worked with Propellerheads for a while, Propellerheads, they got bathed in love.
Yeah.
They didn't have users in Reason. They had fans. I've never seen anything like this.
Yeah. And you know what I think it is? I think, look, the DUC, I could never actually participate there because, you're going to talk about boys clubs, right?
Yeah, that is an old boys club. Yeah.
I wasn't part of the club, even though I was, wait for it, a Pro Tools HD dealer. Right, and a power user of Pro Tools, as well as all the Steinberg products back in the day. Mate, it's because I wasn't there every day just sitting there flooding, awful, posting all the time. I'd go there occasionally when I ran into a problem. And then you'd get the defenders. It's you. It's this, it's that. It's never the software. It's not a bug. It's a feature type of thing. I've gone, oh, fuck, I can't deal with this. So I've never participated there. The dynamics of the forums in general, there's probably a couple that are really surviving in regards to any type of reasonable activity. I could probably name 3, which I won't, but of those, there's one that I participate more only because I've got some ongoing informational threads that I've maintained over the last 15 plus years. And some of the others I'll just drop in occasionally. And as soon as I drop in and I've somehow get the attention of the boys club, they're usually on me like, fuck, man, they're like rabid dogs.
Chum in the water.
Oh,
it's chum in the water.
It's Pete's seen some of it. It's like, wow, what the fuck, I mean, I've got these I call them fans, but I literally have people that have been stalking me for 15 plus years. It's creepy, Peter. It is fucking creepy. These people stalk me and they just sit there and micro-analyze pretty much anything that I do or I say, and they're going, yeah, I got him, and they'll try and wedge something in to try and catch me on something. And I'm like, wow, get a life, literally, I'm only offering some information to try and, give back to the community, But forums. But I actually remember that fallout on that virtual guitarist because I was a Steinberg dealer at the time, and I had it on the system and stuff. And look, I couldn't use it for my original material, right? But I could see where it was very, very useful for people that were doing jingles or
exactly
library music and stuff. Man, forget it. You're not going to sit there and
I mean, honestly, Vin, Hans Zimmer used it on a movie.
There you go.
I mean, but not as a replacement for a guitar. He can get any guitarist he wants. He wanted that special weird sound.
Yeah, yeah. There you go.
Do you remember which movie?
I don't. It was a song with Robbie Williams. That's what I remember. It was 2003, I guess, but I don't remember the name of the movie.
Nah, we'll be able to.
I think he had only one collaboration with Robbie Williams, so it's probably easy to find.
Yeah, there you go.
Hey guys, would you take it against me if I take a very, very quick break, like 30 seconds or so?
Yeah, no, go.
No, that'd be fine because I can stop my recording here and save it just to make sure.
Oh, you know what? I'll do exactly the same thing. Okay. I'm back, guys. Thanks.
See, that was quick.
Yeah.
Well, the window was nearby, so
The bucket.
You had a really quick whiz.
I mean, as a matter of fact, the reason that Wizoo, the company, doesn't exist anymore is because the DigiDesign people hated the name. Because,
yeah. Now, we'll get to that. You told me that in the pre-chat. I was laughing my head off.
Did I?
You told me that in the pre-chat. So I think what we should do, can you just give us a final overview of your time at Steinberg? If you can pick up from there, that'd be good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So yes, Steinberg, it feels like we collaborated 10 years or so, but in retrospect, it was only 5 of them.
Right.
And it was because we did so much together, and it was such an exciting time. Because remember, I mean, virtual instruments had just been invented. Charlie Steinberg had just done the first synthesizer, you know, the Model D. We've done the first grand, then a grand piano, and then from then on, I think the next thing we did was hypersonic, kind of like let's name it. It was kind of like a Roland Yamaha Core kind of workstation keyboard as a software, right?
Yeah, of course.
That was the idea, and that, to me, that turned Paul Kellett into some kind of, I don't know, unreal, holy genius figure for me, because I remember I met with Paul in Cologne, in the summer, in some courtyard, and we sat there for like 2 hours or so, and I told him my idea of that software workstation, and Paul scribbled like crazy. And then we parted, and I didn't hear from him. He was working, for the British military at the time.
Right. Okay.
That was before he joined Wizoo. I didn't hear from him for months. And then I got an email from him, and in Paul's prose, it just said, "Take a look." 3 words. And then there was an attachment, and I opened the attachment. It was the software workstation. It was there. Everything was there.
Amazing.
Absolutely breathtaking. I had never seen anything like this. Of course, we had to put samples in there and sounds and a UI on top of that, but he had pretty much built the foundation all by himself.
Right.
And then we went on to, what else did we do? We did virtual basses because of the success of virtual guitars. That was just a logical step.
Mm-hmm.
And Virtual Guitarist 2 also, which was like a little bit of a technological step. That was also a success, but nothing ever came close to the initial success of the first Virtual Guitarist.
Virtual Guitarist.
Well, and then DigiDesign happened, and in the meantime, of course, our partnership with Hans Zimmer had happened, which of course changed a lot of things. Because through that partnership, Hans's initial interest was he invested money in Wizoo for us hiring a development team that built the biggest sampler in the world for him. That was the idea.
That's right. Yeah. I heard about the biggest sampler in the world. I don't think it ever eventuated, but you can probably give us a little bit more detail on that one.
Yes. Hans has always been pretty open about, what he uses to do his scores. And he will always say that, it was technology that made him become who he is, because he's not a trained composer. But he, I think it started with a Fairlight for him that allowed him to, do demos that sounded close enough to an orchestra. And I think it was pretty public, because he also did interviews every now and then, that eventually he had an array of Roland samplers. Yep. Which was unheard of at the time, right?
The 750s, 760s, all of those. Yeah, I remember those. Yeah.
Exactly those. And he had one for every instrument in the orchestra. Right. I mean, not for every violin, but for every section, right? He had like 40 of them.
There would have been racks of the stuff. Yeah.
Racks of that stuff. And then he moved on to Giga Sampler.
Yes, the infamous Giga Sampler. Yes.
Exactly, the infamous Giga Sampler, but it was the only thing that could do disk streaming at the time, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and the naughty stuff that they were doing at kernel level that, when it worked, and when it didn't, oh boy, did it break. It was...
Yes. Yeah. Yes, but it allowed Hans to take it to the next level, and he recorded probably at the time the biggest and best orchestral library, with the London Symphonic Orchestra and, the stuff only Hans Zimmer has access to. And that's when I met him, actually. I remember that next to his studio, he had this room with, half of the room was air conditioned, I guess, and the other half was servers.
Right.
Not servers, computers running Giga Sampler.
Giga samplers, racks and racks of the things. Yeah.
40 Giga Samplers at the same, that were always running at the same time.
He had 40 individual Giga Sampler computers.
Yes, I'm pretty sure it was 40.
Yeah, just imagine the power bill.
That's insane.
back then. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, but you're talking about a guy who, I mean, the budgets that a guy like Hans has. That's not let's say that's not the main problem, or even compared to orchestra budgets. The fact that you can invite the director every day during making a movie and play him a demo and get approval on something.
Yeah,
that's worth something, right?
Yeah. But it's also connecting all of those instruments into some type of MIDI array and all the rest of it. So
yes,
the behind the scene technology to actually even run that rig would have been incredible.
Yes, and he has always had really, he's always been good at finding the right collaborators, and he had always very smart people taking care of that stuff for him. And also Hans himself, he knows what he wants, he knows what controllers he needs and how to play with them and stuff. His interest was to, become independent of Gigasampler and get probably something custom built that was, let's say, more tolerant to the way Hans works, because he has a special way of working. He works on a level that almost nobody else works on. I mean, for him, a sampler voice is not a stereo voice; it's 16 microphones.
Yeah,
one voice. Stuff like that, and how it all gets mixed, and what's available, and how changeable the sound of the orchestra is from movie to movie, and stuff. And at the time, there was a German audio company that had just gone bankrupt, called Creamware. I don't know if you remember.
Yes, I know Creamware. 100%. Yep.
Yeah, and I think it was a setup between Manfred and Hans. They had talked about this without telling me, that Hans would invest the money into my company that would feed that team for 3 years, so they could build, under our umbrella, they could, build him that sampler.
So this was the team from Creamware that were building this monster custom sampler.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, and they were in a different. There were 7 people, and they were in a different location in Germany. They were like 250 miles away from Bremen at the time. Yeah, and that I don't know if I like that idea that much, because it was not that I wasn't busy enough for with Wizoo as it was, but of course, if Hans Zimmer tells you, look, Peter, and and Hans Zimmer for me at the time being, it could have been Jesus as well. It was pretty much the same thing, right? As unreachable for me. And that guy sits across you and goes, look, Peter, I'm going to put that money into your company if you guys build me a sampler. What do you say? I mean, there was only one possible answer.
Okay.
and it happened, actually. It was a pretty genius team there, a bunch of really, really amazing developers. And so, they pretty much built that system up to a certain degree. And then DigiDesign ruined it all for Hans.
But that thing never became a commercial product, did it?
It became a commercial product.
It did.
It's just nobody really knows. Well, it's not like because it's this big secret, but why would anybody put it out in the open? But it eventually became Structure, the sampler for Pro Tools. So
really,
part of the code that team wrote for Hans, and keep in mind they had only 2 years until Digi bought us, like from scratch, right? Part of that code later got turned into Structure. So Structure was a small version of that.
Right. Yeah, I was about to say it's a small version of it. So just to finish off with the whole thing with Steinberg, because that relationship ended. Was that due to the acquisition? The acquisitions, I'm going to put that in plurals because there was 2 acquisitions pretty close together.
Yeah, so exactly. Avid bought a real company and they bought us. I mean, they had this huge acquisition of, ironically, Pinnacle.
Yeah, because Pinnacle had acquired Steinberg, a year earlier, 2 years earlier? It wasn't.
No, Pinnacle had acquired Steinberg, I think, in 2002.
2002, right.
Yeah, but by that time, Steinberg was Yamaha. By the time DigiDesign acquired us, Steinberg was had again been acquired by Yamaha.
Yeah, that's what I was referring to about with Steinberg. There was 2 acquisitions that were not really far apart, probably a year and a half, 2 years
true.
Max apart.
Yeah, 2 years, I think. 1.5 or 2 years. You might be right. You might be right, Vin.
Yep.
So, I mean, my relationship, or Wizoo's relationship to Steinberg, had been under a lot of pressure thanks to Pinnacle, obviously. I mean, Leon can talk about that time as well a lot, right? Because we worked there together and we suffered together from that amazing culture that they brought to Steinberg. So I wasn't too, it wasn't like DigiDesign, broke into a happy marriage or anything. We still had a collaboration, but I couldn't see a big future for us with Steinberg.
You could see the cracks appearing.
You could totally see the cracks, huge cracks. And obviously, as everybody knew, us getting acquired by DigiDesign was some kind of threat to Steinberg, of course, because we had IP that was core to Steinberg's business, the virtual instruments that was still selling. And I think we solved it really nicely because we made it so. Manfred Rürup at that, he had left Steinberg after the Pinnacle acquisition, like half a year or a year, and he became my mentor in Wizoo. So I have to thank him for everything that he did between leaving Steinberg and then us getting acquired by DigiDesign.
Right.
And now I've lost track.
So Manfred came on and he was your mentor.
How we solved this between Steinberg and DigiDesign. Yeah. Thanks, Vin. So the way we did it was that, and I think it was Manfred's idea, and was the day after the notarization. Of course, we all kept it totally under the lid. The day after the notarization of Wizoo getting acquired by DigiDesign, Manfred and I had a breakfast meeting with Andreas Stelling, who was the CEO of Steinberg at the time, and Kaz Kobayashi, who was the Yamaha, the guy above Andreas Stelling.
Yep.
And we told them the news, and we said, look, guys, we offer, let's just negotiate. Nobody wants to hurt anybody. And we ended up with Steinberg buying the right to selling those instruments for another 2 years. And DigiDesign not seeing their, because of course also they didn't want DigiDesign to see their royalty statements or, any business data.
Yeah, of course.
So it all got solved, and we all still shake hands and have coffee, every now and then. So it was all very friendly.
Perfect. So Avid, your acquisition and your move to Avid was 2005, correct?
Yeah, end of August 2005.
2005. So that's where we pick up your next chapter.
Yeah. And what a chapter.
Yep.
Yeah, so
and it was still DigiDesign back then.
It was DigiDesign at the time. Yeah, Avid was synonymous for the video stuff. DigiDesign was audio, Pro Tools, that was all DigiDesign.
Yeah. And one thing that I learned from having Evan Brooks on, which really surprised me, was that I thought, because they didn't change the name DigiDesign to Avid until about 2010, but Avid had actually acquired DigiDesign in 1996, and they just kept it under the DigiDesign brand. Yeah. Sorry, I'm sidetracking you again.
No, you're not. Totally fine. No, I mean, DigiDesign had a very good reason for keeping the name DigiDesign, because in the music and audio industry, like in their market, it was the strong brand name.
Yeah, 100%.
Apart from Pro Tools, of course,
Yep.
Many people thought the company was actually called Pro Tools. So
they still do. They still do. Yeah.
And so, wow, looking back at this, there was another game changer for me, of course. Firstly, financially, I had never had any, I had never had a positive bank account in my life before, I guess.
Boy.
Yeah, I mean, if you start a company or if you're a freelancer, there's always, some kind of debt. So that changed, financially, that changed a lot for me. But, as much fun as it was, to have a small company like Wizoo and, 100% owned by me, or no, at the time, actually also co-owned by Steinberg. But I was very independent. taking care of payroll and, the day-to-day business, that was really exhausting. We weren't successful enough. The team, that team we had taken on 2 or 3 years ago was super expensive. I wasn't the best CEO in the world, like business-wise. So after the acquisition by DigiDesign, all those things, of course, changed in a grand way. Like all of a sudden, everybody, you automatically, as I said before, automatically everything we did felt like people saw it as like gold dust. Automatically, everybody was interested in what we did. Whereas when we put out our instruments with Wizoo, nobody gave a shit, to be honest. And in DigiDesign, that totally changed. All of a sudden, we were part of a super powerful structure. We had access to resources that we could only dream of. But on the other hand, we also found out, which we hadn't found out during the due diligence, the honeymoon phase prior to the acquisition. We found out that Pro Tools was actually the most hostile environment for virtual instrument that you could even think about, think of.
Yep.
And they found out too, I give you one example. So Pro Tools had that guarantee of, was it like 192 tracks? Like you bought a hardware and that hardware guaranteed you 192 tracks. And I'm putting it very simply. The way it did it was there was a little evil piece of software that would just hog the hard disk, like it would protect the hard disk from anything else.
Yep.
And just hog the hard disk to make sure those 192 tracks were guaranteed. Now, in came we with a sampler.
Wanting some of that space. Yeah, wanting
to place sampler voices, right? And so you can imagine how much of a war that was on one hard disk. So we ended up working with the DigiDesign team for like a year or so. It was a huge open heart surgery in Pro Tools to change, all the inner workings of Pro Tools to allow for a sampler engine. And everything else also wasn't, it wasn't great for virtual instruments. It was more like a fight on the platform for us to get the instruments to the same performance that they formerly had in VST and AU environments. But because we were in Germany, DigiDesign was AVID was so big they had like 4,000 people at the time. My team had, I don't even remember, a little bit less than 20, I guess.
Yeah.
And we were in Germany, so we were kind of like the Pluto in the AVID universe. They loved us. They loved everything we did because in DigiDesign everybody was a musician, so of course they loved virtual instruments, but we weren't important enough for them to really interfere, at least not in the first 1 or 2 years. And as part of the acquisition, we had created an instrument roadmap of like, what are we going to build in the first 2 to 3 years? And we did that, and that was a ton of fun to do. And we enjoyed very much collaborating. Yeah, like the DigiDesign people were a whole different level of professional. Pro Tools people, they were a little bit more serious than the rest of the MI world that we had worked with before.
Right.
So there were amazing people in there, just for an example, like I, for the first time and the only time in my whole life, I reported to someone that was Dave Liebold, the general manager of DigiDesign. And, Dave had been live keyboardist for David Bowie and Billy Joel, and had been a film composer before. And now he was the general manager of DigiDesign, and he was such, like his standards were crazy high. Some people would say way too high. But we learned a lot from him and the team around him in those years in DigiDesign. And I'd say we've built some of our best instruments during that time.
Yeah. So just as a short list of the, and now before we go to the short list, they loved everything that you did, but they didn't love the name Wizoo, did they, Peter?
No, they hated the name Wizoo. I remember that, they were DigiDesign, they had this thing going where they were at the same time hyper polite and arrogant.
Yep.
like trying to really hide from you how much they look down to you, and in a nice way. I remember when they approached us and went like, we don't know if we can keep the company name. And formally, I think the entity, the German entity, remained for 2 or 3 years, but the brand name for that group was changed on day one.
Yeah.
To
Air
technology, which I didn't like that much better. It was just a bloated. It was like advanced instrument research,
That's the one.
As opposed to what? As opposed to stupid instrument research, or I just didn't get what. But it's become a brand name. It still exists. I mean, Air Music Tech is still, they're now in Music. My old team, part of them, they're now in Music.
Oh, so they've separated from Avid completely, Air Technology, because Avid still, bundle their instruments with all the Pro Tools bundles. When you buy Pro Tools,
yeah. That's the stuff that So they. So after I had left Avid, DigiDesign Avid, my old team, so Air, I was in UJAM already by the time. They pretty much joined In Music as part of the Audio acquisition.
Right.
So they were kind of bycatch, of that deal.
Oh, that's right. The M Audio. There was M Audio in the middle of all of that as well. So just real quickly, just the quick list of instruments that you worked on at Avid.
Mm-hmm. So it started with Expand. And that mainly came about because Digi said, we want to see some value for, we paid so much money for Wizoo, and, in retrospect, no, they didn't.
Right.
But anyway, so they wanted something they could give to their users for free. And so Expand was pretty much, if you will, it was a faceless hypersonic. Less UI and, changed content and a new engine and blah, blah, blah. But it was that concept. It was like do you guys remember the EMU? How do you guys pronounce it? Proteus?
Yes. Yep. Proteus, yeah.
Yeah, it was Proteus. It was that as a software.
Okay.
Super successful. I remember after a few months, they had 100,000 users of that thing. You can't say downloads because there weren't any downloads at the time. And then I think it got bundled with Pro Tools, and you could also get it on a separate DVD.
Yes.
And then we did Hybrid, which was a hybrid virtual analog, virtual digital synthesizer. I think still one of the best synthesizers out there. Amazing sounds, amazing possibilities. And then we did Strike, which was a drum machine. We couldn't call it virtual drummer for some reason, but that's what it was like a virtual drummer. And it already had the intensity slider and the complexity slider, that we, by way of a time machine, stole from Logic, which had it 3 years later.
Right.
If you get my
yes. Yeah.
And then we did Velvet. That was a virtual Rhodes and Wurlitzer piano.
Yep.
That was a nice project. Dave Liebold was very involved in that. You could clearly see what love for keyboards he had in that particular project. And then Structure, pretty unloved project, on the team. Because, sampler, we have to have some competition to contact, but there's not a lot of creative fun in building something like that. At least it got us some, I partnered at the time. I did license deals with East West.
Yes.
The Amazing Colossus at the time and their orchestra and stuff. So that was kind of fun.
Mm-hmm.
And then Transfuser, that I think still, we have some ex-Digi people in UJAM. And of course, we still have beers with, some people from the old team. And everybody gets this certain glow in their eyes when we talk about Transfuser, because Transfuser was supposed to be structure for an electronic musician workflow.
Right.
It was pretty revolutionary at the time. It would completely explode the scope of this podcast if I would explain to you guys what it was, but it was this modular thing. It had sequencing, arpeggiating modules. It had sound generation modules, and it had effect modules. And you could stack 3 or 4 of them a revolutionarily intelligent randomization, stuff like that. People loved it.
Yeah, similar to Reason. Like an all-in-one. Did it have sequencing and stuff in there as well, and synth modules?
Yes, and you know what the fun bit is? Now that you're saying it, yeah, you're right. But
Similar,
we didn't know Reason at the time.
Right.
No, I mean, we knew of Reason, but we didn't use it.
Right.
So it's not like we had looked at Reason. But yeah, it's similar. But, also, Vin, weren't the rack extensions something they did later? Reason and the rack extensions? I don't remember.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was like if you will, it was like a mini Reason as a virtual instrument.
Yeah.
That's not a super wrong way to put it. And then the last thing that I was involved in, that was in 2008 when Digi did Pro Tools 8. We pretty much delivered the instruments and the effects for that, the air effects. That was 40 effects modules, and we did 5 instruments. I can't even say if they're still bundled with Pro Tools.
No,
They
are. They are 100%. Air instruments.
Boom. Yeah.
Yep. Air instruments and air effects is still an integral and default bundle anytime you buy a Pro Tools license.
Nice.
And that was pretty cool because we had exactly 5 months for 40 effects and 5 instruments. And
easy.
No, I mean, they're simple instruments, of course. And, partly we reused existing stuff. But, in 5 months.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. So where were we up to? About 2008. So the next chapter, Peter, 2009. Off we go.
Yeah, 2009 is the year when I left Digi and Avid because of 2 reasons. Firstly, I was really, really tired of the corporate world.
Yeah,
and I didn't have the feeling that I have any impact anymore in that company. And also, as you guys probably know now, a little bit later, all the layoffs started. That was the time when Avid, I think they laid off 800 people in the first wave. And then since then, they have laid off, a lot of people.
Yeah. They did decimate certain departments without doubt. A lot of it in America, and then they offshored it. But that's a whole other podcast. Yeah.
And and we all have to thank them because Universal Audio and Line 6 wouldn't be what they are without all those layoffs.
Yeah, correct.
And they did a bunch of really, like, some of the best people went there and did some of their best work there.
Yeah, they landed in a happy place. Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I left the company at the time, and my whole idea was, I can sustain myself for 2 years without earning any salary. And super naive idea, but, and I want to find out what I do. I want to use that time to find out what I do next. And that got pretty much shortcut by, Hans on my farewell tour, NAMM show 2009. I went to the NAMM show, said goodbye to everybody I had collaborated with in DigiDesign, let them know, and introduced my successors to them, and blah blah blah. And eventually went, on a weekend, went to Hans. He had a beach house in Malibu, and he had a little Christmas market there for the kids, as you do. And so Hans and I were sitting on the terrace and drinking mulled wine in January at 20 degrees Celsius.
As you do.
As you also do, right? And so Hans basically said, he had always teased me about being an employee, like being part of a corporation. And he did it again there and said, like, so Peter, what are you going to do? Do you want to be like a little wheel and
a cog in the wheel? Yeah.
A cog in the wheel, exactly. And why don't we start something new? And I said, like, what do you mean? I said, well, I don't know. Let's find out. I'm in, come up with something. We'll do it together. It was fun last time.
Yeah. How many mulled wines were you in by that point?
Again? Sorry?
I said, how many mulled wines were you in by that point?
1. Oh, don't think that Hans needs mulled wines for ideas like that. That's Hans's biggest strength.
Right.
And he was totally Big Brother mode. He's always been a Big Brother, like, huge brother, of course, but, he's always been like that for me.
Awesome.
And it was total Big Brother mode. And said, okay, you know what? Yeah, let's do that. I have an idea. And I did have a vague idea. So you guys probably remember Gear Sluts. It's now what it's called these days.
Gearspace, yeah.
Gearspace, right? Okay, so, and you guys probably remember that was a pretty brutal place at the time and pretty profane and stuff. At least, for us, for Digi. And they were always always a symbol for me, because I remember whenever we put out anything at DigiDesign, I remember when Transfuser came out. Transfuser was in its way, it was revolutionary for a virtual instrument. You didn't have to like it, but it was revolutionary. And there were always these old white men, bitching about like, but at 3 kilohertz, there's something not super transparent about it, blah, blah, blah. And I was so fed up with these comments. I'm really simplifying here. And then at the same time, I've always played a lot of video games. And at the time, you guys probably remember Guitar Hero was all the rage.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember Guitar Hero made $1 billion in the US only that year, right? That was the revenue of Avid, of whole Avid. A little computer game with plastic guitars. And I got it and I looked at it and it had a music studio. This thing had a music studio built in. And I looked at it and thought like, wow, that's where we were 15 years ago. It's really, it's shit, right? It's not what we could build these days. So fast forward. So I was very often in Santa Monica, at remote control, like Hans' studio. And eventually Hans introduced me to this guy I didn't know, Pharrell Williams.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea who he was. Which is super embarrassing in retrospect.
But it was real funny. Pete recognized the name. I've got an admission real quick. Ready? Not to sidetrack too much. Until I started researching your history for this show, I had no idea who Pharrell Williams was.
Oh, wow. That beats me. Thanks, Vin. I feel much better now.
100%. And then the wife looked at the kids are going, oh, I've got no idea. And the wife just said, yeah, that song Happy. And she starts singing. I'm going, can you stop? No, I don't know. I don't know him. So yes, Peter.
Wow.
There you go.
I mean, he was not. I have to, to my credit, Vin. I have to say he wasn't as famous as he is now. But I mean, now he's ubiquitous. I mean, Happy. Everybody knows Happy, right?
My excuse is this: is that the musical palette available is massive. So, and really, what do you focus on? So I enjoyed certain styles of music. The style of music that Pharrell is hugely successful in is not a style of music that I actually listen to or I'm actually, even vaguely aware of. So that just proves that, there is a huge, massive field when it comes to awesome music that's out there. And I remember in one of these earlier interviews, you said that you were embarrassed that you didn't know about him. And I'm like cringing going, fuck, mate, here we are 20 years later, or 10, 15 years later, and I've only just heard of you. So there you go.
I had no idea. I remember, I remember I came to Hans' studio and Hans said, Peter, go to my office, look at the screen, come back and tell me what you think. And I went to his office, looked at the screen. There was a Wikipedia entry of Pharrell next to some astronaut or something. And I went back to Hans and said like, huh? Yeah, some rapper with 2 big sunglasses. So what's that about? And he said, no, that's Pharrell. You're going to meet him tomorrow. And I met Pharrell. And fast forward, Pharrell had a collaboration with Activision at the time. One of the main game manufacturers, Call of Duty and all. They also did Guitar Hero. So Pharrell took me to a meeting with the CEO of Activision at E3, this game convention in LA. And there was the whatever, the head of Guitar Hero. And I asked the guy, I said, like, this music studio in Guitar Hero, how many people actually use this? Because I couldn't imagine it's more than 12 or so. And this was April or May. I don't remember when the E3 was. And he said, yeah, we had it up since September, so it's not that many. So it's only been, a few months. But I think it's about 800,000 songs on there. And that to me was like, shit. So, we built these amazing instruments, and then all these super nerds, beat us up for that. And here's this, this piece of technology that I could probably build in a day, and gets, of course, a very naive thought, right? And that gets 800,000. We have to go there. We totally have to do something for the PlayStation. Yeah. And, we played, and Pharrell and Hans and we played with this idea of a Pharrell hero, and,
Pharrell.
like, there was DJ Hero was a thing at the time.
That's right.
DJ Hero was a successor to Guitar Hero, and we were, our idea was you learn beatboxing, then eventually you learn a little bit of drumming, then you blah, blah, blah. And he would bring in Madonna. He had produced one Madonna album before, so he was good friends with her. He would bring in Madonna, and then you learn a little bit of singing with Madonna, and then you can submit something to Xbox Live or whatever it was called, this platform there. And then there's going to be huge song competitions in stadiums hosted by Pharrell. So, I mean, we didn't dream big, right?
Yeah. Now, you know what we've done again? Peter, we've neglected to say the name of the company that you've just co-founded.
It didn't have a name at the time.
Actually. Right. So, okay, we're getting to that. Okay, sorry.
We're getting to that. Yeah, it didn't have a name yet. I think at the time it was called RCI, Remote Control Innovations, like Remote Control being Hans' studio.
Right.
I think that actually that entity is still existing, but does something else these days.
Right.
No, we didn't have a name at the time. And so Bob Kotick, the CEO of Activision, said to us at the time, hey guys, if you can pull something like that off, and he knew my past in Pro Tools and stuff, you guys have to do something in the cloud. And remember, cloud was in 2009 was what AI is now.
Yeah.
It was like the next big thing. Nobody knew how to do it, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And he said, to do this properly, you need a ton of money. So I'm going to put you in touch with my good friend, Mark Kwame at Sequoia Capital. So we went to Sequoia Capital and met the guy.
These are venture capitalists.
One of the two biggest. Yeah, exactly. Yes, so you go, you enter their halls, and then left and right, you see, the walls are plastered with, kind of like the Oscars of the venture capital world. They funded every company in the world.
Right.
And then the people you meet, so I remember, going to Sequoia Capital to Sequoia Capital frequently to do demos and pitches to their partners. And then I remember a year later, I read the Steve Jobs biography, and they're all in there. Everybody I met at Sequoia Capital is in there. I'm so glad I didn't know that at the time.
Right.
It wasn't that I wasn't scared enough already, as it were.
Yeah.
And yeah, so UJAM, which is the name that we eventually found for the company, because we wanted a 4-letter URL, and it was about jamming. The simple idea was you sing into a laptop or a smartphone, and out comes a finished piece of music, and whatever you put into that microphone suddenly sounds like singing. So that was we were going to become Twitter for music. That was the idea.
Right.
And apparently with somebody like Hans involved and Pharrell involved, and Mark Kwame was the venture capitalist behind LinkedIn. He was the guy who had just done LinkedIn.
Right.
And so UJAM, was his next. It was more like a pet project for him. It was not the same scale, of course, but he was really, really involved. Like he spent a year or two with us, pretty much every day. Amazing guy. And for me, it was unreal, absolutely unreal. I remember the whole time. Why are these people even spending time with me? What have I done for them to be, to justify that? Which was also dangerous, because who am I to question what they think is going to be successful, right? And who am I to question the idea? I remember I always thought like, yeah, it would be great if we could pull this off. Like you croak something into a microphone and out comes a finished piece of music that you can send to your loved ones, and we did pull it off. I mean, Paul Kellett and I, we spent a year or so only on things like figuring out what the person who sang into the microphone actually wanted to sing.
Yeah.
And then, serious, it sounds funny, but it's serious because, and all of us would do it. You have no metronome. You have no sense. You have no pitch reference, right? So you go all over the place, time-wise and pitch-wise. We got that solved. Then how do you put the right chords to it? And then which technology do you use to put music to it? And we pulled all of that stuff off. It worked really, really well. And then we had this decisive moment. Are you guys familiar with TechCrunch?
Yes.
They had a conference at the time that was called TechCrunch Disrupt. I don't know if that still exists. That was 2010 in May. And we got invited among, 20 startups or so to go to TechCrunch Disrupt in their competition, which was kind of like a cattle show. For all the venture capitalists,
the cattle call.
How do you call that? Exactly. Like a beauty contest. We were all put on a stage and pitched, and all the VCs would sit in the audience and take notes and
like the show Shark Tank. Is it? There'd be like
yes, like that. And we didn't even have a product or anything at the time. It was really like literally my partner Axel Hensen, who now runs UJAM, is the CEO of UJAM. He's also a computer scientist. Literally, it sounds like such a garage story. Literally, during touchdown at John F. Kennedy, I heard him yelling next to me, it runs, I got it running. True story. So anyway, we did it. It was highly demoable. Like we did a demo there on stage, and one VC sang into the thing, and it sounded good. And there were like 1,000 people in the audience, and everybody went crazy. And we scored runner-up there against some huge finance platform or something. Like 3 years ago, I think Airbnb had scored runner-up. It was like that level of competition. It was unreal for us.
Wow.
And but in retrospect, I have to say, and then of course, we were for a few months or a year or so, we were the hottest shit. Like every venture capitalist wanted to talk to us. We got so many unreal offers. Peter Thiel wanted to invest in us. Like we had breakfast with Peter Thiel at the time, and we refused. And it was that unreal. I still wake up screaming at night when I think of these, of everything I saw there. But we confused all the attention with actually a working business model. Right. And we did collect, I don't know, like more than 3 million users eventually. But nobody ever, but nobody ever paid any money.
Okay. So you really were going to be the Twitter for music then, I guess is what you're saying.
Yeah, but here's the thing, Pete. It took us 3 years, and the VCs only had breath for one.
Right.
We had one venture capital fund in there from Germany. They invested in us, and they had set a milestone. And at some point, they basically went, "Hey guys, your milestone was 750. You only made it to 500,000 users. We're not gonna put the second tranche in there. The second tranche in there."
Yep.
And
here comes the KPIs, eh?
Exactly. And we learned the hard way. Because we were totally naive before. Again, I'm saying, here I was with Hans Zimmer and Pharrell Williams and Mark Kwame, and I met all these people, and who am I? To question that. So we learned the hard way. They didn't put the second tranche in there, and then over 1 or 2 years, so Mark Kwame stayed faithful to us. Hans's people, Steve Kofsky, Hans's business, he co-owns Hans's business with Hans together. They were amazing. They stood with us. But eventually we just had to concede, okay, no, we're not going to be Twitter for music. We have to do something differently. And that became the UJAM. That was the start of the UJAM that it is today.
Right. So you pivoted away from the cloud collaboration,
Exactly,
back into performance virtual instruments.
Yeah. So the trajectory was more like, eventually at some point we realized, okay, we have to make money some way, right? And at the time, we were the only company in the whole industry that had both deep music technology expertise, in Paul and me and a bunch of other people, but also rocket scientists in terms of cloud technology.
Yeah.
And the entire industry was, ramping up to, you heard the word cloud in the MI industry a lot at the time.
Yep.
And so we could rent out our high profile developers for, a very profitable margin to those companies. And that's how we saved the team until our own products made enough money to sustain the company. And I think that was a 3 or 4 year journey.
Right. Yep. So you hibernated the tech there for a while, didn't you?
Yes.
Yeah. And during that time, you were collaborating with some pretty big companies, one of them being Propellerhead. And so you teamed up with Ernst
Yes.
from Propellerhead,
Uh-huh.
and you developed IDT2. Is that the Instrument Development Toolkit 2? So that would have been like an update to the audio engine you guys were using on the earlier instruments. Is that correct?
No. It's not completely wrong,
Right.
Vin. So the story goes like this. I remember at the most desperate point was a day before Frankfurt Music Messe. Like, Axel and I were sitting there and going, okay, now we really have to rent out everybody. We just, we're otherwise we're lost. Nobody's going to support us. So I go to Frankfurt Music Messe, totally desperate. And I had this ritual of meeting Ernst for, the CEO of Propellerhead, Ernst
Yep.
Nitrosbus, for coffee. And so Ernst and I met, and, we had a nice chat. And then when we got up and, paid the bill, Ernst turned around and said to me, you know what? We don't really have something like Contact in Reason. Would you know somebody who could build that for us? Literally like that. And I said to him, I think I know somebody, and and so we started talking to them. And because Propellerhead, these guys were incredibly smart and very Swedish, so very open to alternative ways of doing business. So they were open we offered them, we're going to build a modular instrument engine. That was our idea. Not just a sampler, not just a virtual sampler. And they basically paid us an advance for that. And that was an advance for their license to use that in Reason. And that became the Instrument Development Toolkit.
Right.
That was a way for the IDT. That was a way for them to offer, because they wanted more rack extensions, obviously in their rack extension store. And this way they could offer to developers, look, here's an engine, here's building blocks, just script together your little instruments, pull, drag some samples into there, and off you go. And that was really successful.
Yeah.
But because Axel, my partner, was also very smart, we retained the right to the engine itself.
Right.
And we retained the right to eventually putting out instruments based on that engine and the engine itself on other platforms.
Yep.
And so IDT eventually turned under the UJAM umbrella. It's called Gorilla Engine.
Right.
And that Gorilla Engine is one part of our business these days. So we actually license Gorilla Engine to industry partners like AAVIM, for example, is one of them who's open about them.
Yep.
But not all of them are. Very often it's just white label. We're kind of like the Switzerland of the industry in that regard.
Right. And we should make a point that at the time that you were working with the team at Propellerhead, which is now called Reason Studios.
Yes.
At the time, they didn't have VST plugin support. They were like the holdouts. They held out a long time, and we had Ernst on the show who actually explained that. And I think they probably held out a little bit too long, but they didn't have the avenue of the massive array of VST plugins and instruments that were available to all of the DAWs, other DAWs. They had to have everything very dedicated. And look, I can understand why they did it, because the platform was very, very stable. It didn't have to deal with, third-party protocols and all the rest of it. But, they eventually went to the VST support. Yes. But at the time that you guys were working, they would, they were a closed shop, so to speak.
Yes, they were. And, and I collaborated with Propellerhead for 7 months. So Ernst called me to help them a little bit, with the rec extension store and, maybe brainstorm a bunch of products. So I was very closely involved in Propellerhead at the time. I went to Stockholm 2 times a month. And you could call it a little bit of consulting. I mean, these people were incredibly smart. And from the outside, at first I was wondering too, why don't you open the platform? And I had a lot of conversations with a lot of people in Reason. But I also have to say, I still admire what they had at the time. I still admire their platform and how they didn't have customers, they really had fans. And even their developers were their fans. There were people who did only rec extensions for a reason. They would never do VSTs. So there was a whole culture. I have to admire that. Building that is crazy, amazing.
And, when Reason first hit, first they had a Rebirth, which was their, the TB303 and the 808 and 909. And
exactly.
That was late 90s. But then when I remember when Reason first hit,
that was I
was at NAMM in 2000 and going, what the fuck? How the fuck is this even working? Just this huge rack of instruments and everything else. And I remember intimately how many configurations that I did with clients with a main DAW that then rewired into Reason for all their virtual instruments and stuff. So it was a pretty amazing environment, and it's amazing how long they actually maintained it without breaking the mold, so to speak, and then introduced the third-party plugins. So, I'm with you. The platform was amazing, independent and dedicated for 15 years, 16 years or so, if not more.
Quite a while. Propellerhead existed for, Aaron, I remember when I dealt a lot with Ernst. It was like he was going on 20 years with Propellerhead. Yeah.
And I mean, I know he sold the company in 2019, and then it's been remarketed now as Reason Studios. Yeah. But I still just remember the Propellerhead days. That was through the heady days of the 90s.
That was quite something.
Yeah. Sorry, I got sidetracked.
That's fine.
So yes, the Gorilla engine is something that. So that's your underlying engine that drives all the UJAM products.
Yes,
and it's also made available to others. Now, of course, I know that you can't go naming other companies that are actually using the engine for.
Not all of them. No. Some of them don't. Don't want that in the open.
No. So I mean, you don't have to go naming them. It's like very similar when we had Jules Storer, who created Juice.
Juice, yeah,
and also has an underlying DAW audio engine that's being used by other DAW companies, but there's not even a whisper of who those companies are. Yeah. I mean, I took a couple of guesses and I was wrong, but I got an idea. I got an idea where some of them are, but I just, that's very similar in the sense that they've got an amazing technology that they've actually licensed, and some people would much prefer that you don't know that they're being the underlying tech for their product is,
It totally makes sense to me why they don't disclose that.
Yeah, 100%. And it's not overly important anyway. I mean, the end product is always going to be the decider of whether the product fails or not. It doesn't matter what the underlying engine is, as long as it's stable,
And the only customer I really care about who's working on Gorilla Engine is Hans. We eventually, we closed the loop. So these days, Hans is working. So we eventually built the biggest sampler in the world for him based on Gorilla Engine.
Yeah, no, of course. So with UJAM, you guys have gone strength to strength. So was that when was the start of UJAM? UJAM as an instrument, virtual instrument developer, not as the initial cloud thing.
Yeah, you got me here. I think 2013 we started developing Gorilla Engine, like IDT.
Yeah,
IDT. That collaboration with Propeller, that was after Music Messe 2013.
Yep.
I think we released our first instrument in. Also we built a bunch of instruments for Propeller rack extensions.
Yes.
They were called like the A-list guitarists and A-list drummers, stuff like that.
Yep.
So that were our first. It was great for us because we could actually, by the time we used Gorilla Engine, it was already tested out there in the open. And had already proven its stability and everything. We released our first product that was Virtual Guitarist, Iron, in 2017, December 2017.
So you resurrected it like a phoenix.
Yeah. What do you do, if you're a small company just getting by, investing every dollar in product development? What do you do as your first product? You pick something that A, has been successful, B, how to take the next step in terms of, engine and features and functionality and realism. And C, you also know you can actually grab the name.
Yeah, so you still had the trademark for the name?
No, we didn't still have it. We had it again.
So someone didn't nab it?
No, it kind of drowned between. So Steinberg apparently had to give it up because DigiDesign had acquired it.
Right.
And then DigiDesign closed down my company, like, the actual Wizoo GmbH in Germany, the entity.
Right.
And that had owned the trademark, and nobody had thought, probably nobody except me still cared about it being available.
Right.
And so, you register it, and then, after a while, it's yours.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
It's unusual. Like usually those things, once they go out there, somebody nabs them up quickly, if anything, just to sell them later on.
Yeah, even just to sit on it and make some money out of it. Yeah,
exactly. But because DigiDesign so secretly closed down Wizoo GmbH, it wasn't a big thing. Nobody actually knew it. It was like a little notarization date. That was all. I think nobody really realized.
Right.
Steinberg, and the Steinberg people probably thought, who's going to give up that brand name if they have it? And I would have thought the same. And in Digi being like the typical, US company where every 3 years people change, nobody cared. So we were just lucky.
Yeah. But that's amazing. So, you just popped up and it's available. Let's grab it again. Yeah.
So, and that was at the time, we were really depending on it to be successful. We had only so many silver bullets. We couldn't afford a product that would have been a flop, and Iron was really successful from right off the start.
Yeah.
So people had been waiting for a virtual guitarist, apparently.
Yeah. Well, there you go. And you're probably right that people didn't go poking around for it, thinking that the trademark was still owned by whoever. Yeah. Whether it was Steinberg or Avid. There you go.
And there was competition. It's not like there weren't any virtual guitars out there. There's always been Real Guitar. And then there's a bunch of other companies. So there have been companies who've tried to, jump on that, on the same train as, and doing virtual guitars. But nobody had done it, with that trademark.
Yeah. Well, look, perfect. So, UJAM, I think it was around 2014, 2015, I think is when you started releasing those instruments. Is that correct?
No, 2017, actually.
2017. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, you've had 7 years now.
Yep.
You're up to over 50 instruments.
We're close to 60 now.
60, sorry.
even close to 60 now.
Yeah, there you go. And it's more than just guitarists. So, I mean, do you want to just give us an overview of the product lines? Because you've broken them up into specific, not genres, but for specific areas, you know. So can you give us an overview on the products that are available now?
Of course. So, well, virtual guitarist, we started with virtual guitarist. That eventually became a whole series.
Mm-hmm.
So we went away from the original concept where you had one instrument, and then they had to cover everything. We in UJAM at some point we decided for dedicated titles, where, you know, in a guitarist, for example, the type of guitar, the styles, the amps, the effects, they're all for either, say, rock or metal or funk or stuff. So that, you know, so that became a whole series. Then consequently, that got followed up by virtual bassist.
Mm-hmm.
And then virtual drummer. So at least we had the backline together, the band.
Yes.
And I don't know what we did. I don't remember what we did next. I think next we did the finishers. No, we did the beat makers.
Right.
So beat makers was, the idea behind the beat makers was, it actually came from me being such a boomer and wanting to do electronic music. And I remember I had all these virtual instrument plugins that had amazing drum kits, you know, for electronic music. But I didn't know how to program convincing beats. And I thought, what if there was something where I just had to hit a key and I would know, this is a proper whatever, dubstep, hip hop, blah, blah, blah beat. So that's how the beat makers came about. And I remember, because nobody actually, when we released them first, nobody knew the concept. And I remember in the first 3 days, we released 3 at the same time. In the first 3 days, we sold 10 copies.
Right.
And I thought, okay, that was a flop idea. And now we have 16 beat makers, I believe, and they are one of the most successful series.
Yes,
so it took some time. Then next were the finishers. And, we always take a little different approach. So, I'm aware of, the Spectrasonics and Native Instruments and Tune Tracks and what have you. There's so many amazing companies building plugins for people who really want to work with them, like who know their stuff and who have a musical education and who actually want to deep edit. We were more aiming, at least in the beginning, we were aiming at people who don't necessarily know how a drum kit gets mic'd up, how a drummer plays, what kind of mixes to apply. Because, so many people make music with a computer these days, but not everybody plays every instrument and not everybody's an engineer. And we kind of wanted to, respect that or, give them tools. So that explains why we don't make virtual guitars, but virtual guitarists. So you also have the performances in there. Or the same for the bassists or the drummers. Because even if you have great drum kits, you still have to program great drum grooves and stuff, right?
Yeah, correct. Yep.
Yeah. So, and then consequently, of course, we also did the virtual pianist.
Yep.
Which was to me a beautiful challenge because I'm a keyboard player. And the idea was this has to sound as good as, what you don't want is this thing to sound like, are you guys familiar with those portable keyboards, personal keyboards?
Yes.
With, multi-track rhythm accompaniment.
Yep.
That's what you don't want. So in virtual pianist, usually we pay a lot of attention, or we pay most of the attention to the content. And then there's phrases. In pianist, we build the player first. So it's actually really the heart of a pianist. And so if you don't play any piano, the goal was you can create a credible piano track and you can control it, real time and stuff. Then we have USynth. That's my baby. That comes from my, from the time when I worked for synthesizer companies, and you guys will have heard that as well from people. For everyone who's a synthesizer enthusiast, and who wants to program synthesizers and play with them, my theory, there's at least 100 people who want to use synthesizer tracks, want to tweak the sounds, but have no idea how this stuff works.
Right.
And that's what USynth is designed for. And I don't want to go on too much about it, but the concept is basically for every sound, you have 5 custom controls that do hopefully exactly the 5 things you want to do to that particular sound. So it's a synthesizer for, in the same vein as I say, we wanted to replace no guitarist. I always say it's a synthesizer for people who don't want to use synthesizers.
Mm.
And then Symphonic Elements is one of, I think, like revenue-wise, our most successful series. That is based on actually Hans Zimmer's library.
Yeah.
So obviously Hans will never sell, at least not yet. He will, sell his own library to everybody. But these are orchestral phrases created with Hans's own library in Hans's studio.
Yeah.
And they're also made for people who have no arrangement or orchestration experience. So, everybody who, can hit a key at a time can create orchestral tracks with that.
Right.
Yeah. So pretty much that's the extent. We just put out a sub-bass plugin last week, which everybody loves in the company. And, bass is something that everybody needs everywhere. Yep. So that's a new series.
Yeah. So that's amazing. So 60. So like, when I was doing the research, there was 50. So I'm a little bit behind, unless you released 10 in the last couple of months.
No. Well, I said it's close to 60. We may both be right. Maybe it's 56 or 57 now. But in the team, I'm always hearing 60. So I haven't counted them in a while. And we've slowed down. Yeah.
Yeah. That's an amazing output in that time frame when you think about it. I mean, because
and we can only do it because we have Gorilla Engine. Because when we build a new series, we don't have to build anything from scratch. It's pretty much Legoing together the modules.
Yeah.
So like if you went like, okay, I want to do Vincents now, right? And you think up a synthesizer that you want to build, it's pretty much just Lego in Gorilla Engine.
Yeah.
And it's really fast.
Yeah.
Props to whoever did the UI for Subcraft. That's a gorgeous plugin.
Oh, I'll be very, I had zero hand in Subcraft. Because who wants to listen to an almost 60-year-old guy when you do an EDM sub-bass plugin, right? Totally get that. But it's the same graphic designer and a bunch of other people who do all our plugins. Same team. And I'll be very happy to tell them. Thanks very much, Pete.
Yeah, no, amazing products. So if anyone listening in, I know this is starting to sound like an ad when it shouldn't be, but anyone that hasn't checked out the UJAM products, just venture across and have a bit of a play. Some great stuff there. Hey, let's move on because this is the next thing that I want to discuss with you is company culture and philosophy, because you're kind of chuckling because you have a what I feel is a very unique type of approach to that, where the company doesn't have it's a non-hierarchical in nature. You don't have hierarchies in the company.
No.
Can you give us some insight on that?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
So I think first of all, I should say what it isn't. We're not a hippie community. We're not dancing our names every morning,
right.
Which is what everybody thinks when they hear non-hierarchical. So we don't have plenums, or we don't have.
You don't have yurts in the waiting room.
No, and it's not like every decision has to be done. We're not a democracy, or in nature, but I'd say we don't have a hierarchy of titles or of power or of positions. We have a hierarchy of competence.
Yes.
So, and it's not, it doesn't come from me. It's something that I have agreed to 7 or 8 years ago when we started doing it. It actually comes from my partners, who have had access to a bunch of people who are really knowledgeable in that field, and are in organizations that spread those news. And I have to say, in the beginning, Well, in the beginning, it was a necessity. It came out of us doing contract work, like developing for other companies. And we were only so and so many people. And just assume you have 12 developers and you have 5 customers. You don't get very far with dividing your 12 people into 5 teams. Makes no sense. So you have to be way more flexible. And you cannot handle that kind of, you cannot achieve that kind of flexibility with a team of 2 developers and 1 manager or something, right? You have to swap people around all the time. And so it started from there being a necessity, and then eventually it evolved over. We have this word in German that I never really know how to translate it to English. It's called Menschenbild. It's like your image of a person. So it assumes, our whole culture assumes that everybody can be completely self-responsible. People don't have to be managed. People don't have to be controlled. There's a level of control in our teams, of course. If you don't deliver what you promised to deliver, somebody recognize, you'll get feedback like that, right? But just because I'm the founder of the company and because I'm the silverback and I have the most, I have shares in the company, I don't have more say than anybody else in the company unless my team says, yeah, Peter, you're the best person for that, and you're probably most competent. So I have a lot of authority in UJAM, but all of that is really just expertise and competence. None of it is title, none of it is position. And I have to say, and we could go on for 5 hours about this, but I have to say we're incredibly productive because of that. We're more productive than all the hierarchical companies I've experienced in my life. The whole collaboration between people is a completely different kind. For me, it's we're so far into that. It's a process, and we're in the middle of it. We're not done yet. The whole idea of managing people to me is so odd now after years of doing this, if you want something that has to be managed, get a few pets or sheep or something. That's, how. And the whole idea of just because I've been in this business for 40 years and I've done what I've done, I'm in some way above somebody else. Yeah, maybe I know a few things better. Or maybe I have a different network or blah, blah, blah. But look at Subcraft. Just imagine I would have played out my position in UJAM and would have dominated how this thing looks like. It would not look like this looks like, which is the work of a lot of people under 30 and a lot of people who work in that kind of music. And some of them having been in, for them, it's been the first product they've ever been involved with. That's amazing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that just drives motivation and it gives the individual the concept of being valued in their work.
Exactly.
Look, I haven't worked in a corporate structure for many, many years. Pete obviously is, embedded in it. Or not embedded, sorry, that's not the word, Pete. But you're involved in that higher corporate level of operation.
I'm down all the way on the leaf of a very large tree is what it comes down to. Yeah.
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 I'm thinking if some of the companies that I had dealt with over the years, we kind of started off with that type of, I suppose, mentality. And then as the company got bigger, it changed. And then the KPIs come in, Peter. This is the discussion we were having pre-show. The KPIs came in and they were starting to introduce, human resource managers and you got to have corporate sales training and fuck off. In the end, I just couldn't stand it. I ended up just, going out and going, I'm not dealing with it.
I have to admit, Vin, we have KPIs.
Yeah.
They're super important but they're not an end in how do you say an end in themselves?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but I bet you the way that you approach your KPIs is far different to having the more structured. If you don't have 25-30% growth every 6 months, you're out.
Oh no. No, we have strategic goals, but they're not decided by somebody, who just had a bad night or so. They're decided by, we have structure. We have structures for that. We have teams for that.
Yeah.
But to speak to what you just said, Vin. So here I can give you a very real world example why I enjoy our culture so much. Mm-hmm. Before I started my first company, I was a freelancer, like you have been probably most of your life, right? Mm-hmm. And or self-employed, whichever way you want to call it. And to me, that was every project I work in was a bunch of freelancers. Let's say, like in Waldorf, for example, there was Axel Hartmann, the designer. There was me, freelancers, and everybody naturally did their best because they knew if they wouldn't deliver, they wouldn't get the call next time. Or in music studios, pretty much like that.
Well, you got to take accountability for your abilities and actually take responsibility for your work output.
There you go. One part of our structure in UJAM, the system is called holacracy. Pretty big word, but actually we have roles in UJAM, so exactly what everybody has a bunch of roles, and these roles have accountabilities. So everybody knows exactly what they're accountable for. Some roles have domains, which is something that only you can decide. Like we have an economist in some of, we're organized in circles, like a Gorilla Engine circle, a virtual instrument circle, stuff like that. Circles have economists. The economist, he's the only one who makes financial decisions, for example. So, it's not dancing names and stuff, but it's so to me, it's very close to my years. I was a freelancer for 20 years and I felt that was my best time until we actually managed to build that culture now in UJAM.
Yeah, amazing. And I can see why it works. Because I've experienced, not to the same level, but I've experienced a culture where it was kind of more, very loose, and there was basically a bunch of creative people that were brainstorming and building the operation and the company up, and then as it got to a tipping point, then it became corporatized, and I couldn't stand it, and I got the fuck out.
Like me and Avid,
Yeah, very, very similar. So, like I said, I think we're kindred spirits in a lot of ways, Peter, because we have similar philosophies in some areas.
Sounds like it. And Peter also comes across as a silent kindred spirit, although he's in a different organization.
I get in trouble enough that I'm a kindred spirit. So
sometimes I feel that it's the good cop, bad cop. Pete just has to tolerate me and pull me into line occasionally, but he's definitely a kindred spirit. I mean, he's sitting in a room full of analog synthesizers, Peter. I mean,
there you go. That gives it away.
Look out, Okay, so end user and community interaction and feedback. I mean, where are you guys kind of? You don't have a forum, or do you? Mm-hmm. I'm not sure. You don't have a forum, do you? Because I know we all love forums so much. Social media? Do you have a?
Yeah, we have a social media team. Yep. Young people, they're on every platform. Not too active on Facebook,
right?
For a reason.
The book face.
I'm doing. Yep. I'm kind of. I'm in the Facebook. We have a small UJAM Facebook community, a bunch of really, nice people, nice users, good questions there. So in terms of how do we communicate with our end users, we have Zendesk. So we have a very active support team where we get our user requests. We do a lot of interviews, so it's not like super public, but we do a lot of user interviews. So we want to even to grow that, actually, to do more user-centric design, because I keep saying I don't want our success to be based on some old guy's gut feelings, and I don't want product meetings where people exchange gut feels. We really want to know what users actually think,
right? And
they come to us, actually. They we have a lot of input. We have a whole channel on Slack that is just customer feedback that gets fed pretty much every day. And it's funny that you're asking, because we just hired somebody who ran the user community for a big music technology company, and for pretty much building that now in UJAM. I think we need a real community.
Yeah.
We haven't been good at that yet, but yeah, as we're growing and the numbers of users are growing, the need for interaction grows. I'm actually planning right now, going back to my magazine past, I'm planning something like a virtual magazine for our users with regular columns, tutorials, courses, stuff like that.
Awesome. Absolutely awesome. So look, and I always ask that question of all of the guests, and we get varying answers. And look, forums can be, you're basically swimming with the sharks.
Yes.
Personally, I've got better. I've become less reactionary. Pete might argue that I haven't.
No, you've gotten better.
Yeah, I've become less reactionary, and like I said, I've still got my stalkers, which still fucking creeps me out. But they just
love you, Vin.
Yeah, they can keep doing what they do, and I'll just keep doing what I do, and I'll interact with people that are polite and respectful, and I always show the same respect to these people that actually communicate. And some actually communicate quite respectfully. And the one that just blows me away is that mostly the Facebook community is actually more respectful, which everyone goes, no, it's kind of crazy. I went, no, it's because people are actually, for the majority, posting under their real name. So as soon as you start posting under your real name, and of course there's fake accounts on Facebook, I'm not kidding myself, but a lot of people that are posting under their real names are very, very respectful. And even if they don't agree with what I've said or presented, they'll pose a question and I'll respond. Forums they've still got this whole counterculture of posting anonymously, which I hate. I've always hated, and I've got a online name, forum name, but I've always got a signature, so I'm not hiding behind a pseudonym. And usually the people that are attacking or have been so belligerent are usually hiding behind a cyber alias. They're never taking accountability or responsibility for what they say. To me, they're cowards. I'm sorry if anyone listening, they're cowards, right? If you're gonna attack someone's whether it's their reputation, integrity, whatever, right? And you're not doing it under your own name, then just shut the fuck up. Sorry.
Then professional shit stirrer here on the podcast.
Sorry. Right? I just decided to throw that grenade in.
Just throw that out there and see what happens.
Yeah.
How was that Peter Gorges podcast? Yeah, it was kind of okay, but in the end,
Vin went off.
yeah, exactly.
Vin went off again. Hey, look, we're getting towards the end. Your thoughts on the current landscape with music technology? This is especially with the expanding and accelerating areas of AI, both creative and generative, and how it's being implemented with, musical and, DAW products, and whether it's virtual instruments or DAW. So it is starting to get in there. I use it quite extensively with AI-powered restoration plugins. I've been using it throughout the show production, and it's been invaluable for me. But this is creative AI. It's not generative. But I can see where, with your products, where the generative AI could actually come into play, and then there's that fine line,
Yes.
But you've got any thoughts there?
So I don't have any smart thoughts on that. I can't claim for myself that I have any more insights than anybody else, really. Of course, AI is something that under the hood, we spend a lot of time with. We discuss a lot, and of course, we've already started developing around that. I can say we haven't really started thinking around what some people actually claim they're already doing, like, okay, play me a sample and this synthesizer will recreate exactly that sample. That kind of stuff we're not doing. But we see a lot, like you just said, Vince, there's a lot of just useful, convenient stuff. Like I give you an example. when somebody uses a synthesizer, very often they have a sound in mind. That sound very often comes from a song, right? What if somebody could go, hey, you know what? He's there with an Oberheim OBX or so synthesizer, and he could go, give me that intro sound from, that sound from whatever, that song from the 80s. You can totally use AI for that these days. It's already possible. Or you can improve browsing experiences that way. So why should people step through lists and lists and lists of presets? Why don't they just enter, like in ChatGPT, why don't they just enter text? And then the instrument or the platform finds the closest sound of all our instruments to whatever they have just entered. So we're thinking along these lines. I can't say I'm driving it in UJAM. No, we have way smarter people for that. I just listen there and, with gaping mouth.
Yep.
In terms of, I remember when, the first generative AIs came out, where you could create a song with a prompt. I wasn't really one of the people who went like, oh, we're so fucked. This is going to kill everything. Because
you've been through that a few times now.
Yeah, we've had a few of those discussions. Yeah.
Exactly. But, there's one difference. So exactly, Pete. When the sequencer came out, I embraced it. When the drum machine came out, when the sampler came out, all these technologies, I always embraced it. And I just recently, that's a thing that's just a hobby for me. But in photography, I remember when digital cameras came out, when Instagram came out, everybody went like, this is going to kill professional photographers. What has it done? It's increased their business. It's created new types of photographers. It's created new jobs. I mean, even the generative AIs in, the graphic ones like Midjourney, for example. Midjourney has created the job of, what's it called? Prompt editor or something. So I've always embraced that. I've always seen the positive aspects of it. With AI, the only thing I can say for sure, I have no idea what it's going to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is so transformative. Wow.
Yeah. Those song generator, the AI song generators, over a course of probably a year or so, myself and Pete have been discussing it on the podcast going, mate, this thing can't generate a song start to finish. And by the time that there's two major ones, and I can't remember the name of them. Those two. And I think my personal problem with those is that there's no ethic behind the people that actually created them. They're not musicians.
Of course.
They don't give a fuck, right? So it's a little bit different in the sense there that there is so much AI-generated stuff now that's flooding playlists and it's stealing, stealing streams and stuff from real musicians. So there is a concern there. Plus these guys, the ethical side of these guys is, what do they use to train? Where they use to train the AI, right? It's pretty obvious. I had a perfect example of where they basically ripped off ABBA Dancing Queen, which is hilarious, right? But, it was hilarious because the prompt was something like 70s style Eurovision pop song about a young girl who likes to dance and wants to feel like a queen, and it popped out Dancing Queen. So they were busted,
that happens. That happened with the graphic ones as well, right?
Yeah, they got busted, and the I think I think 3 of the 4 major labels are going after them. If not all of them, they're actually getting sued, and rightfully so, because they've stolen that content. So that's the issue I have with it. But is it going to wipe out the real musicians? In certain areas, I think it will. Library music, I think it will.
Well, library music, I can totally see that because we have a whole team just working for one major library music company that is very connected to Hans.
Yep.
And so we have some insights into the world of library music and who's using library music. People who want a certain piece of music to made to a description.
Yes.
And that's exactly
what this thing is doing. Yeah, 100%.
Right. But what are we doing? We're building tools for people who want to spend time making music.
Yeah.
So, it's not like anybody who sits down in front of his DAW goes like, oh fuck, I could just now I can just put in 5 words, and what do I do with the rest of my evening? That's not going to happen anytime soon.
Yeah.
There's still going to be guitarists and drummers and bands and stuff like that.
100%.
And I love what you're talking about with the, generate for me something that's like the patch, the sync patch from Fletch or something like that from way back. Like that. That's fantastic.
That's very possible now, and thanks to some AI.
Yeah. No, that would be awesome. And again, that's I can see that as creative, Pete. That's more creative, even though it's using generative, or is it? No, it's more just basically in a creative sense. You're using the technology to be able to help you instead of scrolling through a couple of thousand presets, which I've been doing over the last couple of weeks. Because I've dived back into a whole stack of virtual instruments and stuff, and as you know, Pete, and I'm trying to. I was trying to recreate some of these earlier synth patches that I had, and I just found out that I'd be. I'm struggling. I'm heading back to the hardware.
Give you a patch like Vin's 1997 JD 800
JD
patch or whatever.
stacked thing. Yeah.
God.
So look, I could see that would be awesome. And look, I've even got an idea of where I can actually. There's a plug-in. There's a synthesizer by Dawson called AAVIM, which is pretty amazing. It's a granular synth.
Yes.
And so you can put a riff into it. You drag a riff into it, and then you isolate a note from the riff. It actually it recognizes the pitch, and then you can start playing it. It basically samples it and it loops it, so you can sit there and start playing it as an instrument. That's amazing. I can easily see myself pulling a note from one of my riffs from my earlier recorded stuff, and then just drop it into AAVIM, and then seeing what comes out the other end. So that's pretty amazing. That's not AI though. That's just
it's just fun.
Yeah, he's an amazing synth designer. He's very out there. I've had him on the show. We went down some rabbit warrens, Peter, that I wasn't expecting. And Pete unfortunately missed that show because he was recovering from a travel lurg. But some of those Dawson instruments are just absolutely amazing.
They are, and it's something that I'm very interested in. I admire most. I admire anybody who can create a credible recreation of a real instrument, because that's quite a challenge.
Yeah.
But what I admire most is instruments that nobody's asked for, but when you do them, everybody uses them. Like the most popular example I know is Output Ref. You guys remember that one when they came out back there? Output Ref was just basically reverse sounds. I cannot remember anyone ever saying to me, "Hey Peter, have you ever thought about doing a full virtual instrument just full of reverse sounds?" And then when they put it out there, it was a huge success.
Yeah, mate. Yeah, they'd be getting used in trailers and intro music and do those rises and builds, and I can imagine it would have been huge.
Whatever it is, all the DAWsome stuff that you just mentioned, like that's new stuff. I'm always interested in concepts like that.
Yeah, absolutely unique. Every one of them is completely different. One of them is using chaos theory. I'm like, what?
Of course.
It's absolutely amazing. But again, and then the virtual instrument guys, there's heaps of them. But one of the companies that I've been diving into recently is Cherry Audio, and they've got access to a synthesizer museum in the US, I believe, and if you have a look at their list of instruments,
it's just my basement, Vin.
They've broken into Pete's basement.
Yeah.
And some of the instruments are amazing, really unique, stuff that you could never find out in the wild. Some of them are just impossible to find out in the wild. And then, if it was a monophonic, then all of a sudden it's polyphonic. They can make it polyphonic, and then it's got aftertouch and velocity that the early instruments didn't. So, I mean, there's amazing scope.
I love that stuff too, but that's more like the hunter-gathering me. Like a Cherry Audio, I can probably rebuild Pete's basement on my computer now with Cherry Audio stuff.
Not quite, but close. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, maybe close. Yeah,
close enough that nobody's going to care.
Yeah,
exactly.
We'll care, Pete. We'll care. All right. I think we're kind of probably getting right to the tail end of it. Is there anything else, Peter, that you want to chat about while we're all assembled?
Very nice of you asking, Vin, but I think I have wasted enough of our time.
No. There was
and your listeners' time.
There was no time wasted at all, mate. That's been fantastic. And we covered. Look, we had a huge amount to cover, and I think we've done actually all right.
Yes.
I know. I'm looking at the timeline, and we're going, oh yeah, we've been going for a while, but we've had shows that have been tipping that 3-hour mark. So it's been awesome. So I think if we want to tidy this up and we'll close off. First thing I want to say is thank you very, very much for your time and energy today,
Definitely.
Peter. Greatly appreciated, and of course to you again. Pete, you've been kind of quieter than some shows today, just kind of listening in.
It's all about the guest, and Peter had a lot of stories to tell. So,
and I was pretty quiet as well, comparatively,
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that was quiet, Vin? Oh, wow.
We didn't have to bring on the rant alarm or anything like that. So,
No. That's usually in the Tech Bites show, and Pete and Chris, my co-hosts, they've got now it's a rant alarm, isn't it? It's just like this bell.
It's just a rant alarm.
It's this bell.
Oh shit, Vin's gone off the rails again.
Vin's gone off the rail again. Bing. Okay, all right.
Great.
Good on you.
Hey, guys, it's been a huge pleasure. And actually, I have to say, Vin, I was super impressed with your research with the, how do you guys call that? A run sheet?
The run sheet?
Yep.
Wow, I was pretty flattered that somebody would take up all that time and, go through my life and structure it for me. It really helped in those 4 hours or 3 or 4 hours that we spoke. It was a huge pleasure for me. Thanks very much.
Look, if anyone is gracious enough to give me their time and energy, I am going to take the time and actually do some research and study as much as I possibly can about the history, so that we have a nice flow of the conversation.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what it did.
And I always love doing that because, again, I find just fascinated how many times we've cross-pollinated, right? With the Wizoo and your history, how many times we've cross-pollinated over the last 25, 30 years, right?
Yeah.
Without me ever putting a name to it. Right, so this has been an awesome experience. Thank you again.
Thank you, guys.
That could be a nice way to kind of just put a nice full stop on the show. And okay, on to the next.